On today's special episode of Homeworthy, we're venturing into the heart of the English countryside, where history and character are woven into every corner. First, we'll start in Suffolk, where an antiques dealer lets the 1700s past of her Georgian home guide, a style that's both playful and steeped in heritage. Next, we'll head to the village of Corsley, where a former Anthropologie buyer and his husband, the brand's former CEO, open the doors to their jewel box estate, filled with treasures collected over a lifetime. And finally, we'll travel to the Cotswolds, where an interior designer's converted barn brims with charming hues inspired by the estate's rolling grounds. This summer, spend the hottest months of the year in style with Homeworthy as we visit the most extraordinary homes around the world. From the sun-soaked shores of the Hamptons to the classic beachfronts of Nantucket to the vibrant courtyards of Morocco, be sure to subscribe to Homeworthy's summer series to make every day feel like a vacation. You're watching Homeworthy, where we believe every home has a story.
Hi Homeworthy, my name is Ambrose. Welcome to our home in the English countryside. Can't wait to show you around. Come on in.
You're watching Homeworthy, where we believe every home has a story. Like and subscribe for more.
Hi, my name is Ambrose Miller and we are in Suffolk in the UK. We are at our home that has origins of the 17th century. So I am originally from Birmingham, Alabama, born and bred. My family, from as far back as we can trace, are from Alabama. But I actually moved to the UK about 13 years ago. It was right after college. I went to Davidson College in North Carolina, and I started working for Bank of America in Charlotte, which is only about 20 minutes away from Davidson. And there was an opportunity to move to London for a project. And I remember saying to my boss at the time, put me in, coach. I want to go to London. I want to go to the UK. It was really because I had traveled abroad when I was at Davidson, and we had about 2 weeks in London and fell in love with the art, history, culture, and I was dying to get back. So the first opportunity that presented itself with the bank at the time, I jumped at it, and 13 years later, here we are. So we are in Suffolk in the UK, so we're in England. It's what in the region called East Anglia, and it's a wonderful part of the countryside. So we are about an hour and a half by train into London, or from London. I drive or take the train into London probably about 2 or 3 times a week, so it's pretty accessible from that perspective. But we're in a beautiful little village just outside of Bury St. Edmunds, and I absolutely adore it. It's funny because whenever my friends from back home in Alabama come to visit, or friends or family, they say, you moved 3,000 miles away just to move back home. And that's really because the village definitely has a kind of an Alabama feel to it, kind of a small town, slower pace, especially outside of London. And it also means that you are able to get a bit more for your money than if you were to live in London. Our home has origins from the 17th century. It starts from the back, so about 1650 is when the original foundations were laid. Foundations, it's kind of built on earth because there weren't such thing as foundations back then. And it's kind of a bit higgledy-piggledy towards the back of the house. And as you move forward to the front of the house, that's when you see slightly larger proportion rooms, slightly higher ceilings. And again, that's just because as the families, as generations continued on that lived here, had more and more money, they would upgrade or effectively add on an extension towards the front. And so the most modern part of the home is the front, which is a bit of a Georgian exterior. I live in our home with my husband, Ben, and our 18-month-old little boy named Hendrix, and our 2 dogs, Theo and Edison. So we are in the foyer. So the way that the house is built is that it has two long hallways that runs from the front to the back of the house, on the top and then the bottom as well. And then all of the rooms go off of those hallways, which is really nice because it means that when you open your front door, you can see all the way through the back if I don't close this divider door. But this foyer, we really just want it to have a bit of a punch when you first walk in. We also want it to complement these original tiles, these Victorian tiles. But I like to say that this is kind of like the religious hallway as we move into the foyer, just because I have some of my religious paintings up. I'm obsessed with anything Italian Renaissance or anything Italian or really continental European religious studies. So that's just my background in art and art history. But one of the things that we wanted to have is a focal point, and we ummed and awed about this the entire time, is having this Sputnik, this Murano Sputnik chandelier. It's probably the one thing that I had to really convince my husband on because of the size of it. And as you can see, it's not the biggest space when you walk in, certainly compared to some of the homes I've seen in America where they have 20-foot ceilings. We don't have that there. We don't have that here, rather. But what I think that this does is it adds a contemporary flair, but also a focus on that artisan and craftsmanship, which I think is so integral to any piece. But the funny part about this is that even though we just about got it in this space, I couldn't actually add on the bottom Murano spikes because otherwise it would touch your head as you walked by, and my husband and I are quite tall, so we didn't want to potentially bump into it and knock it down. But I absolutely love this foyer. I think the fun part about it is this color green, which took me about 2 years to find, and I've painted this probably like 4 or 5 times. Different colors of green. This is actually called a night vision green, and I think it's perfect. I think it has a very classic feel, but again, a punch and a pop of color, which I think is always really nice when you first walk into a home. I think it also really works nicely to showcase some of my favorite pieces, which are 2 French oils. They're from the turn of the century, so around 1900. French oils, and we actually got this when we were on honeymoon. So my husband and I were married in Tuscany, and in order for us to get back, instead of flying, because we had to bring so much stuff down to Italy, we drove back, and we just took a nice leisurely drive back, and we went through Saint Emilion. And of course, I have a habit of, no matter where we are, see where I am on Google, and then type in antiques to see if there's anything nearby. And there was this amazing antique shop just outside of Saint Emilion, and this little old man who had just floor to ceiling antiques, and he had these 2 pieces in the back. They're oil on wood. They're not by the same artist, but they would probably have been completed by almost like studies, academic studies. So probably 2 pupils in the same class. But I think they're just fantastic. There's nothing grand about them. I don't think that they're not pretentious whatsoever. They're just studies, but I think they're so beautiful. And every time I see them, I kind of think about our honeymoon and how much fun we had. One of my other favorite pieces in the foyer, and again, I just wanted to put everything that I love really a lot just in one space, right? But is this a beautiful Italian bust. It's done after an 18th, 19th century Italian bust. This is probably early 20th century, but I think it still is quite beautiful. And the idea is anything that has a skull from a motif perspective is just talking about brevity of life. So it's a memento mori is what the term is referred to, but I just think he's really fun. He's usually wearing a Santa hat during Christmas. He's wearing birthday hats if there's a birthday. Right now he's wearing a fez that I don't even know where I got this from, but I just thought it was quite fun. And then what I always love to use is bring a lot of different color and different stones and layer. And so these are some amber beads that I found when I was in Istanbul. But yeah, I just think he's really fun. Another fun piece that I think is really classic and you'll see throughout the home is these chinoiserie blue and white ginger jars. So these are porcelain ginger jars that I had commissioned when I did an artist residency in China about 5 or 6 years ago, if not a bit longer than that. And I fell in love with the region of the capital, the porcelain capital of the world. And it's something that, again, you'll see throughout the home because I feel like it's classic, but also it's very fun. The artisan and the craftsmanship required is second to none. And it's something that Relic has really kind of become known for. It's just my general obsession with bobbin furniture in blue and white ginger jars alongside oil paintings. So there we are. I think I've stayed in the UK for so long, mainly because I love the history and the culture of it. So when I was at college, so when I was at Davidson College, I studied art and art history. And before that, when I was in Birmingham, I went to the Alabama School of Fine Arts, majoring in art. So to be able to live in a place that had so much rich culture and just had also so many different cultures culminating in London, especially as a hub, really made it hard for me to leave. So I work in finance, but I also founded a business called Relic Interiors that's an art and antiques dealing business about 3 years ago officially, though I've been collecting for many years before that. The ethos for Relic Interiors is really to make art and antiques transparent and accessible, because I really don't think that you should be limited by your budget to live with beautiful things. So what's really fantastic about having your own art and antiques business is it means that you can decorate your house and it's constantly changing. And that's really where our home comes into its own, because we're able to use the various rooms, the different settings, to really kind of showcase the various pieces that I offer on Relic. It's all on Instagram and we have a website, but it's really fun to kind of play around with the decor of the home when I get new pieces in. So now we're in the Snug. The Snug is a bit of a different concept versus the UK versus America. I would say it's most akin to like a den, but the idea that it's snug, it's snuggly, literally snug as a bug in a rug, that type of mentality. And because of that, it's, I guess, the informal sitting room. And because of that, we really wanted to kind of lean into it being a bit darker, a bit moodier. This is the perfect winter room because when it's dark and cold outside, we have the beautiful Inglenook fireplace there. My husband loves doing a big fire, a roaring fire, and it's really nice just to have sat here, cozied up, reading a book or watching our favorite program. But yeah, it's probably one of my favorite rooms in the house. Again, I was in charge of all of the art, which was really nice. But my husband, this is his claim to fame, he picked out this color, this wall color. So it's called Mission Blue. And we knew we wanted to go for a deeper, darker color. We were thinking about a dark green, but I knew that I wanted the foyer to be a green. So I thought, I don't want this to look like a hunting lodge. so we finally settled on the color of blue. And again, it's those process of discovery. What I think is really nice is that any of the deeper colors or bold colors really, they really have the opportunity to showcase artwork. I am a bit partial to kind of a gold framed picture. So yeah, it works really well. Some of my favorite pieces here are, oh gosh, where do I even begin? I love this Celine horse head. So this is from the Pantheon. This is a copy, a resin copy. This was actually a limited edition done and commissioned by the British Museum. It's done in mid-century. So again, it has a bit of age, but obviously it's not from the Hellenic period, but I think it's really striking. It's unexpected. I think my husband and I both like when you walk into a room and you just find something that makes you smile or something that's like, oh, I was not expecting that. So I've always also loved anything to do with horses. I love horse art, horse portraits. 2 horse portraits are up here, which are some of my favorites, are by Alexander Pock. He's a European painter in the turn of century, so late 1800s, early 1900s. But he did beautiful equestrian portraits, mainly of military styling. But yeah, I just think those are really nice, and it kind of complements the kind of the horse. There's a horse head thing going along here. What I find amazing is when we first moved into the house, and we were living in a flat in London, so we didn't have a lot of furniture, and certainly not furniture that we wanted to bring with us. So we spent the first year or two at auction houses, tons of auction houses around here and just in the countryside, where you have these big country homes where people are moving on, people are downsizing, whatever the case may be. And it just means that you can get these beautiful antique pieces for, at the time, pennies on the dollar, or pence on the pound, depending on who you're speaking to. This is an example of that. This Georgian tall boy. Every time I see one now, I seem to try to buy it because I think they're beautiful. I think they're very kind of handsome pieces. And you get them in all different types of conditions as well. But I think all the kind of the nicks and the scuffs, it just adds to it. All the patina just really kind of shows its character and shows its age, which I think is quite charming. And obviously the ginger jars, the blue and white, again, they kind of go with pretty much everything. Another piece that I really enjoy in here is this Italian Renaissance piece here. You probably can't see it. It's very dark. It needs to be cleaned, if I'm completely honest. So I would have to take it to a restorer to do that. I have an amazing restorer in London. But it's effectively, you see a central figure on the left, and then you see animal studies. And this is, again, interpret it in various different ways, but it's a sign of enlightenment, a moment of being revealed to by the heavens or by an angel. Some people is kind of debating on which angel and which scene it's depicting, but I just think it's really nice. And because of its deep tones, it demands you to get very close to inspect it. And I think that's always really nice when you have a piece that just commands the viewer to come a little bit closer and share a little bit of a special moment to it. Throughout the house, you'll probably notice that I have, for window treatments, there are some curtains, but the vast majority are tapestries, just because I am obsessed with textiles. I think adding texture into a room through various different types of textiles is the easiest way to make a room look lived in, to make a room feel like it's been collected instead of curated as such. And I have a few of these Uzbekistan Suzanis, and I think they're just beautiful. This one probably is only about 40 or 50 years old, but they were effectively marriage textiles. And the term Suzani kind of comes from thread or million threads, and the idea that, the marriage will last as long as there are threads in the tapestry. That's one interpretation of it, but I just think that they're beautifully done and rich in color, and they come in various palettes. I particularly like these because they feel a bit more muted, but they add a visual interest into a room. And then kind of returning back to the Inglenook fireplace, again, this is where we normally put the Christmas tree. This is where we spend the most time as a family, me, my husband, my son, and the dogs, and it feels very kind of cozy. And it's nice to be able to have one of my pieces when we're not using the fireplace right now, because it's in the summer. One of my favorite paintings that I've been able to source is a Henry Frederick Lucas painting. And I'm obsessed with his work, mainly because he is just second to none regarding equestrian portraits. I think the detailing is really fantastic. This one is actually, I sourced this one for relic, but I have one that I bought at auction that I don't think I could ever part with, just because it's really quite special to me. But it's nice to have this on display here when we're not using the fireplace, but obviously when you're using a fireplace, do not put any artwork above it. Especially not one like as old as this one, because I'm sure modern fireplaces are a little bit better insulated, but this one is not. But yeah, this is the Snug. I think it just has such wonderful character to it. I really love the exposed beams. I think that's a really kind of fun and authentic element to the room. And this is where, again, we spend so much time as a family. Living in a home with a history as long as ours does, it's such a privilege. When my husband and I were looking at moving outside of London and buying our first home and buying a house, we knew we wanted a period property. We knew we wanted something that had character and a bit of a soul to it. And we could have never imagined we would find this house. So it's called Chapel House. We jokingly refer to him, that house, as Chap. And we say that, you know, we just had such a good energy when we first walked in. And I know that people try to describe that, what that feels when you know, but we genuinely just said, this is it. Before we even set foot in it, actually, just from the pictures that we saw on the listing, we said, this was it. This was embodied everything that we thought we wanted from a family home. And I think that we always say that Chap is very happy with what we're doing because we're bringing him back to his former glory. So we are now in the dining room. This is probably the room that sees the most attention whenever we have friends over, which is often, just because it's nice to have a big table spread and just have a lot of fun. If I'm completely honest, when we first moved out here, it took us about 5 or 6 years to renovate the house slowly. But every year we've had a nice Thanksgiving where about 20 of our friends, 18 to 20 of our friends, come up and they stay in all of the rooms, sleeping on floors, on sofas, whatever the case. No one's precious here. And we extend this table. My husband actually made this table. And so it can fit about 20 or 22. There's usually someone kind of sitting in the hallway because it goes so long, but it's such good fun. But I absolutely love this room, and I can't remember who said this, but the saying was, you know, make sure that your dining room is really kind of leaves a statement, it leaves an impression on someone, because you're not in there for very long. And if that's so true, you'll probably spend, you know, several hours cooking and then have a meal and it lasts an hour and a half or so. So make sure that it is memorable. And so that's the reason why I've included some of my absolute favorite things. I keep saying that, and I think everything in this house is my favorite thing. But one being this French crystal chandelier of a ship. I have been pining for one of these for years. I think it was actually Kirsten Dunst who said that she had one in one of her homes, and I had never seen anything like it, and I just fell in love with it. And one of the beauties of, again, having Relic is that I've had an amazing time meeting so many different other dealers who are traveling around the world as much as I am, finding and sourcing different pieces. And one of the dealers named Mike, he came across this bad boy. And as soon as I saw it, I said, you have to sell that to me. Like, I don't care. Just name your price. I have to have this thing. Luckily, he's a good friend and a fair dealer, so he didn't completely rinse me for it. But it's one of my favorite pieces. It was a light. It can be wired as a light. However, you'll see there's not that much light in this room, and that's intentional, just because however you want to view it, we like eating by candlelight. And it's just, again, a bit of drama that you only do when when your friends and family are over. So you might as well. It's normally just us sitting at the kitchen island if it's just the three of us. So whenever there are friends around, we make the effort and eat by candlelight. So I'm going to change this into a candelabra. And so whenever we have our next dinner party, it will be lit and ready. Another really nice thing about this room is, again, my husband built the table, and it was our table from London. He's now like really upset because he's like, we need to throw that away, but it has such sentimental value to me. It's just a wooden table. You know, all the pieces we get sourced from a local hardware store in London. So it's kind of a match of smaller bits of wood. But on the table is this 17th century Verdu tapestry. It's dated late 17th century, early 18th century Verdu tapestry. And it's a Flemish tapestry that has so much history to it. Verdu just basically means it's green. What you can see is that they normally have a lot of different botanical studies. They have different motifs. This one in particular has a bird motif and again foliage, which I think is really nice. It has this kind of, it's worn in places, but it has this type of warmth to it that I think is really quite nice. And again, it goes back to my kind of love of textiles and the use of textiles in a room. We don't eat on this, I promise. So I don't want to have, other art dealers and antique dealers really upset because I'm eating on the tapestry. We don't. I promise. We put it away safely whenever we're actually eating and just pull out a normal tablecloth. But I think it's a bit of fun and a bit of drama to complement the chandelier as well. And this room is just about drama, isn't it? One of the less dramatic, but hopefully as lovely pieces is one of my sofas that I designed. So for Relic Interiors, I not only buy and sell art and antiques and deal in art and antiques, but I also design furniture, indoor and outdoor furniture that's inspired by a lot of the antique collections, pieces I have in my collection. And this is one of the two-seater sofas from the Chapel Vale collection. I think what's really nice detailing, if I can brag a little bit, is this beautifully made of French oak based off of a chair, a bobbin armchair at the turn of the century. One of the few claims to fame that America has in regards to antiquities is I want to claim the invention of bobbin. So there's a little bit of debate about that. But the idea originally was that bobbin is just made up of little bits and pieces of wood from a factory. And again, it wasn't considered highbrow at all. And in fact, it was a little bit considered a lower class thing. But as it became, as a lot of things do, it became in vogue and it made its way to Europe. And so you have French and English bobbin pieces of furniture. I love them because I think it's really kind of fun and whimsical. And I wanted to design a collection based off of that. And we came out with Chapel Vale earlier this year, and it's been fantastic in regards to the reception of it. And it's really nice to have something that you've designed in your home, in your home that you can enjoy. And so yeah, this is one of my favorite pieces. It also comes in a 3-seater sofa, which is very amazing. We have that in one of the upstairs rooms, but yeah, just a kind of a pride and joy moment here. Okay, so to continue on with the drama of the dining room, another piece that I really enjoy being in here are 2 white peacocks. Now these are actually stage design sets, or part of a stage design, and they're done by the artists who worked at the Old Victoria, or the Old Vic Theatre for the best part of about 40 or 50 years. They're all hand painted, hand done, and I think, again, they're just so fun and a bit different. It's just a bit odd, like a lot of the things in this room, but I think that it's really quite nice. They're subtle in their palette, but they're quite striking as objects. And I love the kind of the whimsicalness of this juxtaposed the hyper-realist drawings by one of my absolute favorite contemporary artists. His name is Ramadan Hamis. He is from Tanzania. I originally saw this portrait when my husband and I were at a friend's wedding in South Africa in Cape Town. And it was one of those moments where I saw it from across the room and I just beelined straight to it. And I just thought, that has to be a photograph, but I know it's a drawing. And again, sure enough, it's these hyper-realist drawings, and this is actually a self-portrait. And since Ramadan has become a really dear friend of ours, you'll see a few of his works throughout the house. Really, it's important to me to have the Black image throughout our home. I collect a lot of different pieces of art, and I'm always drawn to figurative pieces. So it's really nice to have the Black image juxtaposed to some of the continental European antique paintings that I have. I think it's a really kind of a nice and fun play on design. So I am obsessed with having a really nice tablescape. And so wherever I go, I'm constantly collecting different plates and bits of china, just because I think it's really fun to have something interesting when you're at a dinner party. Some of my favorites are, this is based off of a Spanish librillo, but it's a contemporary piece. So librillos are these big, beautiful salt glazed bowls and plates that have this kind of traditional blue and green design, which I think are really fun. That combined with something really fun and contemporary like this Emma Bridgewater piece of ceramic. And again, it's just, I think they're really nice and fun and colorful. And then this one is probably one of my favorites as well. It's a Turkish design, hand painted in Turkey. I think I smuggled this in my carry-on when I was coming back. But yeah. So as far as my personal style and how we decorated the house, it's a little bit of everything. I joke to say with Relic, we go from classical to kitsch, and I think that's very much the style of this home. We want it to be true to the bones of it, and it has so much original charm and history. So we didn't want to go super modern because that's not really our taste per se, even though we like modern pieces and we kind of sprinkle them throughout. We really wanted to lean into that characterful, really kind of deep, traditional style with pops of culture and pops of color, you know, throughout. So each room, it's funny because when my husband and I, before we were married, we talked about what would be our dream home. And he said, oh, in my dream home, every room would have a different theme and every room would have different color. And I remember thinking at the time, like, ooh, I don't know if that would feel very cohesive or look very good. But I didn't say that because I still wanted to impress him. So I was like, yeah, definitely agree with that. But it's funny because now, as we've decorated each room, each room has taken on a different style. Though I feel like there's a common thread throughout, and I think that's the art that we bought together and then the art that I have for Relic. I think that's really the commonality between it, and you'll be able to see that as well. Even if they're different color schemes and different kind of ethos in each room, there's certainly a common denominator that I think is our style, which is classic, traditional with a bit of a twist. So we're now in the drawing room. Again, this is probably most akin to a formal living room or formal sitting room. Again, I think this was before, would have probably been where the women would retire to speak after dinner time. But for us, it's really just a room to have a lot of the things that we've traveled and collected, things that we really adore. And we actually use this room a lot, especially after we put Bubba down to sleep. It's nice to just have a little bit of an adult time of just relaxing and maybe having a glass of wine, having probably a whiskey for my husband. Yeah, and just appreciating the things that we have. One of my favorite things in this room, in the focal point, is the chandelier that I actually bought when I was in Paris, wedding dress shopping with one of my best friends, Shannon. The intention of going to Paris was just a wedding dress shop, but of course, I just want to pop into this one little shop as we were walking to lunch. And this man had the most beautiful shop. It was probably the size of this room, just completely rammed full of different bits and pieces. And I saw this and I asked him, is it working? And he said, yeah, sure. And again, thinking like, I'm just going to trust him, sure. And getting this back on the Eurostar to London, I don't think I won too many points with my friend Shannon because I think she was so embarrassed with me having this massive box. But I think it's really fun. And again, just every time I see it, I kind of think of the fun time that we had. And it was such a nice girls' trip. Another thing that I love just about living in a period property and having such an amazing home to decorate is it has all these beautiful features that we had nothing to do with. We just moved in. But you get to decorate around them. In this room, it's really this marble fireplace. You could probably have this room completely empty and just have this fireplace and you'd be sorted. It's from a design perspective. But of course, the magpie and hoarder that I am, I wanted to cover it with all different bits and pieces. But I just think that it has such a nice it adds such a nice focal point to a room. It is a working fireplace as well. And it's one we don't actually use that often because when we want a fire, we go through to the Snug with the bigger fireplace. But I just think that the detailing is beautiful, and it's one of those things that really makes me feel privileged to live in a house with this history. And certainly this would have been the reception room for the malt master whenever he had guests around. This would have been the room they probably spent the most time in as he was trying to impress them. This is a brass dog. That's what they refer to as Hollywood Regency. So this would have been made in the 40s or 50s. It's amazing. For a long time, I had it on the coffee table because why not? You know, you just want to be unapologetically yourself. And I think all rooms should have a little bit of humor. And I think he's really fun. When I brought him in though, because I found him in London, from someone who was selling them. He had in his family for about 40, 50 years. It was his father's at the time. And he said, you know, we need to make space, so we don't need a massive dog in our house. And so when I took him out of the boot of the car, my dogs start barking because I guess they obviously realize it's a dog type figure. But I think he's so fun, whimsical. It's one of those fun pieces on Relic that I use quite a lot in the still lifes that I put together because I think it's, again, unexpected and very, a bit gaudy, but a fantastic way. Right? Something that's maybe slightly more muted, but again, a bit more sculptural is what they refer to as a bin in bronze. So this is probably hidden behind the door here. It's very heavy, so I'm going to try to not break everything as I'm pulling him out. This is, I often, if I ever come across them, acquire them. This is a bin in bronze. It would have been a replica, probably mid-century replica of a 19th century original from the Kingdom of Benin, which is now parts of Nigeria effectively. And it's illegal to have the original one. So I want to reiterate that it's a replica, a mid-century replica. But I think they're so fantastic. You might have seen one in the dining room when we were in there. I always have them because I think that they're nice sculptural pieces and they're quite tactile that it makes you want to pick them up. And I think next to, say, a classical plaster bust, that either color and texture and material juxtaposition really looks really nice in a room. And again, it's all about visual interest, but it's also about living with things that you love. So, and I love them, so he's here to stay. And one of the things I mentioned before is the piece of Hendrik Frederick Lucas that I probably would never part with. And I caveat this to say, virtually everything in our house is for sale. I joke when I say that, but I'm also kind of serious because we use our home as a way to showcase the various pieces. But there are a few things that my husband and I will never part with, and this is one of them. It's just a fantastic equestrian portrait by one of my favorite artists. Again, to be able to capture a horse in its likeness or anything in its likeness, this kind of hyper-realism, I really have an appreciation for. You probably saw that with the Ramadan Hamas hyper-realistic portraits, but I think it's really quite an elegant piece. It's very small. The detail is next to none, and it requires you to really kind of go as close as you possibly can just to see it. It's titled Mermaid, and I got this at auction probably about 4 or 5 years ago. And it's one of my favorite pieces. I move it around the house sometimes just so I can always make sure that I see it. And we're spending a lot of time here in the drawing room the past few months, so I moved it into here. But it's been in our bedroom, it's been in the landing, it's been in the kitchen. You know, it's one of my favorite pieces, and it's definitely here to stay. This area in Suffolk had 2 different types of economies. One was brewing, so anything from like malt making, any type of brewers that were nearby, and also in textiles as well. And this house was a malt master's house, so anyone that was in charge of, or the gentleman that was in charge of overseeing the organization of getting all of the malt in and processing it and then having it shipped out, he would live here. He resided here with his family, and then there's also servants' quarters and servants' stairways at the back of the house as well. I think as soon as we walked in, when we saw it for the first time, and the estate agent mentioned that it had ties to Truman Brewery in London, my husband, who's obsessed with craft beer, said, "Okay, right, where do I sign?" You know, he didn't actually have to tour the property. He loved that history in itself. And I'm very cognizant of even when I'm dealing in antiques, that I am simply a custodian. You know, a lot of the pieces I have in my home have been here long before me, and they will be here long after me. And I just feel like I just have this privilege right now in this moment to enjoy it. And then hopefully pass it on to a new owner or buyer or customer, whatever the case. And that's really the way I feel with CHAP, is that we are simply the custodians, and we want to do it the best service that we possibly could, and add a little bit to that history. But you know, it's been around for 350 years. I'm sure it'll be around for 350 more. So we're now making our way to the kitchen. I think everyone says this, that the kitchen is the heart of the home, and it's definitely rings true in this household as well. I was going to try to pretend like I made all of this, but I certainly did not. But we do love to have carbs on the ready whenever you're a little bit peckish. So in this room, again, this is part of the back part of the house, so it's a lot smaller in scale. It has lower ceilings, you'll notice, as opposed to, say, the drawing room or the foyer. And it's not a big space at all, but it certainly fits the purpose that we have it. We often have the majority of our meals here sat around, and even if it's just with either our parents or our friends that come around, we always just loved having a big spread on the kitchen island, which is actually something I'm very proud of, because we made this from an old carpenter's bench. So you might be able to see the old vise, and it came from the workshop of a carpenter. And we loved it so much because, again, that kind of antique and old, and this isn't antique, it's probably like early 20th century, but it just has a really beautiful kind of aged patina to it. But to make it functional, we knew that we needed to have a white, clean surface top because all the little holes and the scratch marks in the top of the carpenter's bench is not conducive for cooking. So we found an old restaurant that was a seafood restaurant, and they were closing down, and they had two massive stainless steel tables, and we effectively cut the legs off of them. I built a subframe underneath the tabletop, and so that we could then attach it to the carpenter's bench. But whenever I want to make it look fancy, I put on a nice tablecloth and then just set out a spread. But when it's us, it's usually just the stainless steel version, and then we just wipe it clean, especially with a toddler and their little smudgy fingerprints everywhere. It's a lot easier to deal with. On the table, we have a selection of pastries and homemade bread. I will say that my friend Liz joked that every time I talked about moving out of London into the countryside, I said, "Oh, I can finally have enough space to make my own bread. I can make my own bread." So we have homemade bread here, though I didn't make this bread, though I can make similar types of bread. And then we just have some pastries, which my husband loves. He works from home, so he loves it whenever I set it up like a patisserie or something. But yeah, it's really fun. And again, this is a very kind of cottagey kitchen. We spend a lot of time in here. You see the dogs are in here constantly. We cook. My husband does the majority of the cooking. So one of this kind of splurge items in the house for doing a lot of the renovation ourselves, it meant that we can really kind of splurge on the items that we really wanted. It was this 8-eye Lacanche cooker range, and it has a double oven, and it cooks a 20-pound turkey in about 2 hours. So it is well worth it. And when you have 20 hungry guests for Thanksgiving who want a turkey in 2 hours, we have it sorted. But one of my favorite things in the house, let alone the kitchen, is this tea towel, and this is from this says London, and it's just of one of the guards, but it's from my grandma, so we called her Mama. And this was in her kitchen for years and years, so my mom's mom. And it's so funny that it's almost like she knew that one day I would move here, or one day one of us would move here. But it's just really nice to have around, and as a reminder of my roots in Alabama and of my mama. She was a formidable woman, and hopefully I can be half as amazing as she was. So, but yeah, we love to have some of our just incredible things here, but it's so practical. Like even this tablecloth, this is amazing. We got this in Rhodes, in Greece, and it looks super delicate, but you can throw it in the washing machine and air dry it. You know, it's one of those things that we live in a house that is lived in. You know, it might look curated now. It does not normally look like this. We have like, I love, again, my American roots, having these like American quilts, these antique quilts. And what these are normally is kind of nicely draped now, but what this normally does is just cover this up because we have the dogs up here. You know, we have Bubba up here with his crayons and things. And, you know, we want to make our home feel warm and inviting, and I would hate to have friends come around and they feel like they couldn't relax. And that's one thing that we both love to do, is relax and have friends around. So now I wanted to show you guys our downstairs powder room. Someone once told me that it's probably the room that guests, if they're only staying a short amount of time, will leave the most impact. So you should make it something memorable rather. And so that's what we did here. And we refer to it as a little jewel box, but effectively I just wanted to make it feel like you're in a Turkish hammam. And that was kind of led by having this sink that you would normally have at a hammam, which is basically like a Turkish spa, effectively. So I was able to find a marble dealer in Turkey, and we told them what type of marble we were looking for, the dimensions, and they were able to hand carve it to the dimensions that we required, because again, this is a very small room, but we wanted to have a lot of impact. And then we found these tiles. Again, it feels quite modern in the fact that the way they're laid out, but it also feels a bit rustic in the way they're done, that every one has a different finish and a different glazing on it. And that's from Mandarin stone. And Mandarin stone was also able to give us that violet Carrara marble. Whew, that's a mouthful. So it was the deep veining of the marble, which I think is really nice. And again, a shower room, when we do have 10, 12 of our friends staying over, it's nice to just have an extra shower in the house so that you don't run out of hot water too quickly. But that's it. Okay, so now we're gonna go upstairs to see some of the bedrooms and the nursery. I mentioned before that some of my favorite pieces of art really kind of include the black image, and sometimes it's very hard to find pieces, antique paintings, oil paintings with the black image. But this was absolutely one of my favorite paintings in the house. I think it takes pride of place. It's an 1856 copy of a piece that was done in the 1820s, I believe, called The Young Courtesan, or it's sometimes referred to as the Allegory of Infidelity. And you have the central female figure here that's looking out to the viewer as potentially her next lover, and she's surrounded by three figures that are obviously all eyes on her and giving her different treats and treasures to win her heart, but she's obviously on to the next. I just think that is really quite beautiful, the depiction of the black figure to her on the right side of her, or on her left as she looks at it. But I just think that it's a fantastic piece. And again, it was originally painted by Alexandre Francois. But yeah, it's one of those things that I love, that image. And then behind me, you'll see another Ramadan Hamus's piece that I actually gave that to my husband for our first anniversary, because it was paper is the anniversary gift. And because I had become good friends with Ramadan, I commissioned him to do this piece, and it's called Shushu, which means grandmother or old mother. And I think it's just beautiful. And so many people, as they come up onto the landing, they think that it's a photograph. And then you get very close, and you can see that it's a drawing. And I think it's magnificent, honestly. And it's such a delight to see every day. Now we'll make our way to one of the guest bedrooms called the map room. And we titled it that or named it that because we wanted to, again, have a lot of the pieces that we source from around the world in one room, and it feels like an explorer's room as such. That was the original intention. Now it's just turned into like it feels like like your grandmother's sewing box, because I keep, when my husband's not looking, I could keep putting more color and more frill in it everywhere. But what I love in this room, very selfishly, is my 3-seater bobbin sofa. So this again is from the Tablescaping collection, and I think it's really nice. It's done in a dust rose velvet, and it's just super comfortable. One of my friends, Claire, and her kids came up for a weekend, and her little girl Lily just was in love with the sofa, and we would catch her just asleep or curled up in the corner of it, and it just, I don't know, it just made my heart sing, because that's exactly what we want. You want well-made, comfortable furniture built for a lifetime. So, but yeah, we were able to just have a little bit of everything in this room. This is an original bobbin piece. This is early 20th century. And again, this is kind of the motif that was that inspired the new Tablescaping collection. I mean, you'll probably find a billion examples of bobbin throughout my house. We jokingly say it's an obsession, but it's true. I think it is. But this is the map room. And this quilt, again, talking about textiles, I actually received that from a friend that I met on Instagram. So on Relic, which is where I sell the antique artwork and the bobbin furniture, and also textiles, I've been able to meet a load of different amazing dealers, but even more amazing are friends on there. Customers, people who want to collaborate, people who also share this love of interiors. And one of them, one of my lovely followers, sent me this because I kept complaining I could not find enough quilts. But now I have too many, so I feel like I should repay her the favor. But yeah, Relic has been wonderful for that. One of my favorite design tricks, or maybe it's not even a trick, just one of my favorite design techniques is layering rugs, layering different colored rugs, textured rugs, style of rugs. I actually saw this originally when I was in South Africa, and we were staying at this beautiful Airbnb, and it was just a mismatch of 15 different rugs in their sitting room. And my husband and I both said, like, this is just so fun and it's so nice. And so it was certainly a conscious effort when we had the time and space to finally to layer the various different rugs. And again, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about, this idea of textiles and adding texture and color. And it means that you don't have to be too serious about your interiors. You can just put together what you like. And if it's all coming from you, from your own aesthetic, it will all pull together. So this rug is one that I got when I was in Morocco with a good friend named Tia. And it was so funny because you should have seen us going through the airport with like 17 bags each just full of Berber rugs, and rugs from the Atlas Mountains. This is a contemporary rug here that's supposed to look antiqued and worn and things. And then this is an Afghan rug. And this is again just a wool Afghan rug. And I think altogether they're just so nice. That next to the quilt, next to the Suzanne, next to the French pelmet, it's just all of it together, I think just really kind of pulls together to make a really beautiful piece. And that's what I love to offer at Relic or through Relic Interiors. And in fact, I commissioned this ikat tablecloth, this round tablecloth, to have made because I like the idea of just adding a splash of color in a guest bedroom that you can just kind of change very easily, but it's just fun, and it just kind of shows that it has a nice texture to it. But yes, I love layering. I think it's a really kind of fun and easy way to bring a new life to a room without changing your furniture or a massive financial outlay. So now we're in Hendrix's room, or the nursery. Though I say it's a nursery, we were just saying that it actually is a room that he can really grow into. The initial thought around this room is surrounded by the color of the wall. It's called a pate color, but I really wanted this kind of terracotta color to be the base, the foundation of the room, namely because I really wanted to use this color somewhere in the house. And it didn't feel too feminine, didn't feel too masculine. So it was a perfect palette to then create this room around. And the theme of it is really just started out as safari themed based off the paintings that are behind you. But what I really love in this room is the collection of antique samplers here. So what samplers used to be before there were phones and the computers and things, little girls would practice their alphabets or practice their sewing skills on what they would refer to as samplers. And these are the sewn things. So they would normally just have the ABCs or maybe a Bible verse or something of that. But what I think is really quite charming about them is that they'll have the date in which they're made, the name of the person who made it, and then the age. So this one is from 1882 at age 9, and her name was Sarah Miles. Things like that is quite sweet. And occasionally, which I think is really endearing, is that you will find a little bit of a spelling mistake, and it's because it's done by a child. But I just think that was quite nice to have Hendrix grow up around something like that. And then also he's practicing the ABCs, which is never a bad thing. My obsession with bobbin continues with the crib, but I think the kind of most exciting thing about this room, and really the thing that spurred the design of it, was this collection of 19th century paintings of safari animals. So I have an amazing dealer, his name is Richard, who deals in all types of art, and he's absolutely fantastic. He's the loveliest person in the world, and he was able to find these from a private estate. And when I saw them, I fell in love with them. And he said, I don't want to split them up. I don't want to sell them individually. I want to sell them as a set. And when I saw them, this is years before I had Bubba, I just thought, oh my gosh, those would look perfect in a nursery. But I don't want to jinx it, so I bought them with the intention of selling them on, but secretly hoping, I think I put them in a price point that it was too high that anyone would actually buy them, so they wouldn't actually sell. So, and as soon as we found out that we were expecting Bubba, I immediately took them off from sale and knew that they were going to have the pride of place in his room. So it's funny because I'm sure we could simply Google what this animal is, but my husband and I just like to pretend, like make up different names for it, and Hendrix is starting to make up different names for it as well. But yeah, I just think this is such a nice room. We wanted to have a big couch because if you've been there with newborn days, you know you won't be getting a lot of sleep, and so we've spent many a nights sleeping here while he's trying to get some rest. But this is probably my favorite room because it's the room that my little boy went from a little baby to this rambunctious, willful toddler. So yeah, it really holds a special place in my heart. Home to me means a place where you can genuinely be your authentic self. I don't care how cliche that sounds, but I often speak to people, and when we talk about decor or styling or what to do with their interiors, and they say, oh, I've seen this trend, I really like that. I see that trend, I really like that. And that's fantastic, but surely you want your home to be a place that really kind of embodies everything that you believe in, everything that you love and cherish. You know, you shouldn't follow some hashtag or some trend because it seems popular right now. We always say we have the absolute luxury of being able to travel around the world, visiting family and friends and seeing new places and doing new things. But we always say as soon as we come home, there's just kind of this warmth that we really just can't wait to get back to. And I think that if you can create that, you know, I think you really kind of won the lottery.
On today's episode of Homeworthy, we're in the English countryside visiting an exquisite 18th century house nestled in the charming village of Corsley. This extraordinary home belongs to Keith Johnson, the visionary eye behind Anthropologie's iconic aesthetic, and his husband, Glenn Sank, the former CEO of Anthropologie and its parent company, Urban Outfitters. Set against the idyllic backdrop of the English countryside, Corsley House cuts a striking figure with its stately facade and picturesque grounds. Inside, you'll find treasures from Keith's decades-long career sourcing and collecting antiques and one-of-a-kind objects from around the world. Outside, a romantic walled garden, whimsical topiary, and a graceful fountain emphasize the home's sense of history and its connection to the land. This is a home that tells a story, not just about design, but about a life rich in adventure, curiosity, and a profound appreciation for beauty in all its forms.
You're watching Homeworthy, where we believe every home has a story.
Hello, Homeworthy. I'm Keith, and welcome to Corsley House. Hi, my name is Keith, and welcome to Corsley House in Corsley, England, in the English countryside. My career has been quite varied and quite a journey, and intersecting with my husband Glenn, and we've been together for 60 years. We met when we were 9, and we've been together ever since, and we got a company going called Anthropologie many years ago, and that started an incredible life for me that I had just had a blast running around the world, finding interesting things and trying to tell stories in our retail stores and help tell stories. We did things like we'd invent a character. Maybe it's a girl who's making pottery in the south of France. So I would go out and look for things that she would have in her home. And we would always have these reference points of these fantasy people. And it kept us all very focused. But the upshot of all that is that I have been incredibly varied in my tastes and always looking for new things and crazy different things. So somehow a whole variety of influences have worked their way into our home in England. The stuff that I've just had for a lifetime. Glenn and I have been together forever, so I don't actually remember time before him. We were in school, or I was in school, and the teacher brought Glenn in. He just moved to our neighborhood, and it was a very liberal, at the time, if you can imagine, 60 years ago, anything being liberal, but it was a liberal school, and the question was, do you believe in God? Which seemed amazing to me that we're asking that question then. And Glenn made the point that he only believed what his mother told him to only believe what he'd seen in person. And so he didn't believe in God. He did not believe in God, but he didn't believe in God because he doesn't have proof. So this did not sit well with the rest of the class. Everybody believed in God, and that's what you did. So at recess, he was jumped by most of the kids in the class. I, at 9, was the same size that I am today. Everyone thought I was going to be a football player. Well, that never happened. But I could take care of him at that moment in time. So he looked up and said, my hero. And he will he will say that he knew that was it for him. And then it took me, to be honest, a few years longer. So I think when we were 12, we pretty much made up our minds that was that. And here we are, and in a blink of an eye, here we are. This is our drawing room, living room, drawing room. It's the biggest room in the house. I've had this piece, this sort of Gothic revival bookcase, for something like 20 years, and it's been in multiple homes. It was a gift to me from Glenn, and it's one of my favorite pieces, and every time I speak to the antique dealer I bought it from, he reminds me that he wants it back as soon as I decided I don't want it anymore. I just love it because it's one of those things that has had past lives. It was in a big country house that became a boys' school, So on the back of it, it's just filled with all this graffiti from the boys over, the course of 140 years or something. It's just filled with, little sayings and hearts and crazy stuff. And of course, just a great repository for all my stuff. This table, this was an antique table from South Africa with some very hard African wood. And there was an artist from South Africa, and he put this iron to lengthen the table. So it's an iron and wood table. And what I remember about this experience was this guy lived in this old factory, and he lived in the guardhouse of the factory, and then was making all his things in the factory buildings. And he was just such a cool guy. And I had taken my nephew, Alex, to South Africa with me. He was so cool that one of the things, he was silly affectation, but he had his belt and he was buckled on the side. And Alex he has an excuse, he was 9 years old. I had no excuse, I was like 50 or whatever I was. And we both showed up at breakfast the next day with our belts, on the side, because we just thought we'd try to be as cool as this fellow, but would never work out that way. So things, just things that the memories of this sort of 50s lamp from a French flea market, the bookcase with the ceramic books on top were from these wonderful girls that I gave a gallery show to many years ago from Sweden. And I'll never forget our time going around Sweden and Stockholm with them. Pottery bought in the English countryside, and these crazy wax figures that I bought in Venice. This Calder mobile that I bought at a flea market here in Frome, a village just outside of our home. So again, it's just that sense of, it's just all the travel that I've done. And then engaging with artists is the most special thing that I do. So when I used to buy and look for things for our shops, the best thing to do was to find someone who was super creative, and then they can bring something that I couldn't even imagine to bring. So here, like this glass sculpture, I was at a graduation show in Eindhoven, in Holland, and she had just done this program in Venice, in Milano, if I'm getting it right, remembering right, and she just blows the glass into bits of furniture, and I just thought it was just an extraordinary thing to do. What I admire about things like this is that you think, where do things like this come from? Like what is the concept of, like, how do artists think of these things? Be careful if you ask, because sometimes the explanations can go on and on forever. But what you realize is that beautiful things come from a process. Beautiful things don't just appear. I think what I've learned about art and about creativity, I mean, it's not about copying a moment. It's not about, it's about a spirit. And I just love connecting with these young people all the time they weren't trying to make money, they're just trying to express themselves. And they did it with a deep knowledge very often. And I mean, just connecting with some of these kids sometimes was some of the best moments of my life. You get an idea in your head and things happen. I've always believed that. So I was at the French flea market in Paris, and I saw these benches. And these were from the Pompidou Center, a museum, the wonderfully contemporary museum in Paris. And they were for sale, for a lot of money. And I just didn't know what to do with them at the time, and I thought it was too much to send to shops, so whatever. But it registered in my head. And 10 years later, I'm walking down the street in New York, of all places, and there was a shop that had these benches for their shop, and they were closing the shop, and everything was for sale. And I'm like, oh, we meet again, you know, in the most unlikely place. So that you have to manifest, you know, what you want in life, and then it can often happen. Like this sofa, I just didn't know what to do. I'm not a great one for pattern and fabric, but I met this woman, Polly, who dyes her own fabrics. And she just has, you know, she buys antique linens, mostly from France, from Provence, and dyes them in I think, wonderful colors. And then my friend Leslie Ashman, who has this company called Swarm, and she used to work at Anthropologie, and we were very good friends. And she saw the sofa, and then she made these for me, just marbleized fabric, you know, and I just, you know, of course, it means the world to me because Leslie made them for me, and they're beautiful. I was at a graduation show, and I just happened to be walking by sculpture school, and I walked in, and they were having their graduation show, and one of the objects on display was this dog. And I mean, you know, you could look at it and say he's been burned or something, but I actually looked at it, and it's just the sweetest, most delicate thing, and her expression is absolutely wonderful. And I thought, I have to buy that. And so the graduation ceremony was going on. The woman that was looking after their little gallery space said, well, let me see if I can find him. So she goes upstairs and gets, his name is John O'Reilly. And she got John to come down. He's wearing his cap and gown. And I bought the dog from him. And I think it was meaningful for me. I think it was meaningful for him too. And I went on to commission a horse from him, which I hope to show you later. And a couple of other things as well. So when you find someone that you love, you know, stick with them. Here's the fireplace, made by Jam. It looks 1,000% authentic to me. And you can see carrying on the motifs of the outside of the house. So just making sure that the house there's continuity in the design. In the old days in England, they didn't have French doors per se. Very often they would just have these enormous windows, and you could sort of come in and out through your window. So, and of course, the amount of glass and light is, you know, a big reason why we bought the house. So this is our dining room. Like most people today, I mean, I know there are people who have formal entertaining quite a bit, but most people, dining room is a very underutilized room. So I just wanted to make this very user-friendly. So I've got sofas and chairs, and Glenn has a knitting group, and it's Glenn and like a dozen women here every week sitting around knitting. I'm still waiting for my jumper now, which is what they call sweaters in England. I'm waiting for a very long time because I think the knitting group is much more about gossiping than anything else, but because there's no sweater yet. But there's some pretty cool things in here. Some friends make these amazing lights. Draga and Aurel is the name of their company. And I love their lights and so many things that they make. And the arches here, I just suggested a cathedral to me. And the statue was given to Glenn by his mom many years ago. These glasses were all made in Murano. And the artist took his books, his favorite books. This is Don Quixote. And he burnt them, of course, which is completely sacrilegious, but he preserved them at the same time. So he took the ashes and put them inside and then blew the glass. This is extraordinary because this looks like it's just an old engraving. It's based on an old engraving, but it's all calligraphy. And and it's apparently it's the government report on the accident of 3 Mile Island, which was an atomic accident many years ago. And so he drew all that out. Incredibly time-consuming, but I think, incredibly beautiful. Another wonderful sculpture from John O'Reilly. Again, he just captures almost the moment of birth in a way that I don't know anyone else that can quite do that. This is a portrait of the Queen. The photographer's name is Levine, and it's the only official portrait of the Queen where her eyes are closed. It's a lenticular print, so it's these tiny little ridges, so it kind of moves a bit. And it's taken with, I think, like dozens of cameras, and to create this very interesting feeling. I quite love them. Some more of my doodles. And these dog sculptures, which I adore, are from a Welsh sculptor named Sally Matthews. And anything to do with dogs I love, and these I just think she makes them out of hay and cow muck and worthless stuff, but she just, I don't know, I think she's able to get something about the way dogs express themselves, or I don't know, they come alive for me. Decrepit leather benches we've had for donkey years, and I love things when they're very beaten up. It's just, it's who I am. It's who what our company was about in a way. That very, patina. Although it's definitely on the wrong side of patina, But these originally were billiard benches, so they were on tall legs, and you'd step up to them, and you'd look down at the billiard table. So they were for viewing, billiards. One of my favorite things in the house has to be, well, here's Thatch, one of my real favorite things in the house, and then of course Thatch's portrait. So I noticed on Instagram that there was a local stylist named Liddy Holt who was looking for a Welsh Corgi, and strangely, Welsh Corgis are actually quite rare in England, and we've had them for 45 years. So I called her, and I said, well, I've got a Welsh Corgi. So she rushed over, she took one look at Thatch and knew that he was a star, which he is, of course. And the next thing you know, he was in an ad campaign for Butler & Wilson, which is a great jewelry company in England. And so Thatch's portrait was, everywhere for a while. My little star. The house was, it was cared for, but in no way was it what we wanted it to be. Exactly. I mean, we didn't, thankfully, and there are very strict rules about historic houses in England. Fortunately, we didn't want to bend any of the rules because we love old houses, and all the quirks and things about them are what works for us. It was tired, it needed new bathrooms, it needed a new kitchen. Glenn is obsessed with cooking, loves cooking. Kitchen's always a major part of the home, of course, for everybody, really. I wanted to make that just as great a space as I could, and for him, it needed more light, so we were able to put in a huge skylight. There's a reclamation place very nearby us, and which I haunted to find some authentic materials, mostly for the garden, for old stone paths and brick paths. And my philosophy has always been to work with what's there, work with the history of the house, and honor it as best as you can. It wasn't really a renovation or even technically a restoration, but it was just sort of like just really celebrating what was there and then having some fun with it. So I'm going to take you through into the kitchen. Part of the kitchen, is the scullery, and this is where back of house doing the dishes and storing all your better china. And details that I love are just like these sinks are, they're all made of wood. So if you drop something, a dish, it's much less likely to break than if you dropped it on a ceramic sink or a metal sink. This is a potter from South Africa. I see this saying, and there's almost never a day in the world that we live in where I can't look at that and think, yeah, that's true. And then just funny things. Like I have this crazy collection of, yes, they look like eggs, but actually they're pottery. And the idea is you put these under your chickens who aren't laying, and it gets them to start laying eggs, or so the theory goes. But they're everywhere in France at antique shops, quite a bit. So there must be something to it. Very English thing. You do the dishes, and then you just put them here, and they drip down and dry. And honestly, it's easier than a dishwasher, I think, sometimes. By the time you find a place to put the dishes in, take them, half wash them anyway, it's the easiest thing in the world. I think it's a brilliant system. I'm a New Yorker in my soul. I love New York. 21 Club, a big part of the history of New York. And every year, for I don't know how many years, but quite a few years, they would give their best customers a silk scarf. And it was a new design all the time, every year. Of course, having a collector's mentality, I got one, next thing you know, I had 10. It's an illness for people who collect things. Other crazy things, these Murano liqueur. And the liqueur company back in the day would have Murano sculptures as the corks. So how crazy is that? And they've become quite collectible, but it wasn't so unusual. But there you go. This is where I spend a great deal of my time, making espressos. And I collected espresso machines. So this is like one of the great collectible espresso machines. It's called the Atomic. And it's a 50s icon. People who, it's just a period piece that it just says it all about mid-century and the atom, and it's got a lot in this little thing. It packs a lot of style and information. So back as my collector and what I would say about manifesting. So I couldn't find one, and they're collectible and expensive. They become relatively hard to find, and of course the prices went up. And I was in Australia on a buying trip, and they briefly made them in Australia. So I thought, oh, maybe I'll find one, because half the fun of buying something is not that you go out and you just spend the money. It's the hunt, and you can find it for less. It's just more fun. Human nature. I don't know why. And I couldn't find one in Australia, but the place that originally made them was selling T-shirts. So I bought one that said Atomic Espresso Machines on the T-shirt. This is a joke. I came home from Australia, got an Atomic Espresso T-shirt. I was going down to the flea market in New York City on 25th Street. It was quite a great one for the longest time. Now it's quite reduced in size. There's a big table set out, and there's a sign that says, everything on the table, $10. So I'm looking at it, and what do I see? And I've looked for a long time. That machine sitting on the table for $10, and I'm wearing the T-shirt that says Atomic Espresso Machine. So I quickly took the T-shirt off and turned it upside down and put it back on. I certainly didn't want to go to the guy with that T-shirt on. And so I got it for $10. After all, after looking all over Australia, so there it was on 26th Street in New York City. I needed a gate to keep my dogs from, getting everywhere, and so I had this lovely guy named Colin who made this gate for me, and then I had to fix my lead roof. One of the joys of owning a country house in England is that you have to very expensively repair the roof all the time. Anyway, so the fellow who made it, who repaired the roof, gave me this little lead mouse at the end of the day. It was just awfully sweet. So rather than have it just a lost object somewhere, I made him part of the gate. So now he's just, he's a reminder of this lovely guy who charged me a fortune for my roof. So, and then here's the kitchen. So this is where, Glenn is a passionate cook, so it was important for this space to be just really light and airy. So created this big skylight. We were able to put in another window, which we did, and made a big light and airy space. When we bought the house, the aga, which is what every British country person likes to have, is an aga stove, was sitting right here awkwardly in the middle of the space. I don't know why, or the history of all that. So there was a huge amount of reorganization in here. But thankfully, you had these incredible floors, these wonderful floors. And as every good decorator will say, you can often start with a wonderful floor and some good architecture, and away you go. You don't need much more. I've always made big islands for Glenn. They wind up really being big islands for me because I just fill them up with stuff like everything else. I just fill, These are French bottle racks, and which I bought hundreds of over the years because in the stores we just would always put mugs and objects on them. It was just the most great place to, for selling, but incredibly practical in the kitchen too. Just love having that. Keeping with my theme of coffee and espresso, this is one of my favorite objects. Because when we grew up, there was a place, and it's still there in New York City, it's the oldest coffee shop, I believe, in America, called Cafe Reggio. And they had an even larger version of this. But my fantasy for years was to find one of these machines. It's from about 1910. And I finally found one by weird chance on eBay, but it was in Colombia. If you look at this chair, it just looks like an ordinary sort of French, wicker chair. But in fact, it's solid bronze, and it weighs something like 150 pounds. And it's a reproduction of Van Gogh's chair that he used in Saint-Remy in a sanatorium in Saint-Remy before his death. So it's actually lifted up and tied together, and it's quite a tribute to him. But if you don't know that it's bronze and you think you're just going to quickly move it, you're in for a surprise. It's funny because this side of this room is the oldest part of the oldest part of the house, and where the ceilings become much lower, and the room's a bit more intimate. And then we have these amazing stone and lead windows, and this leads out into what I think is one of the prettiest parts of the outside of the house. It's one of the things that I love because it has like a castle turret, and it has a fairy tale quality to this entrance to the house. These sofas are Dutch 18th century sofas. The table is just sort of a Gothic revival oak table that, again, from my friend David Grocott, who has given me everything that I half the things that I love from David. I just collected everything white. I tried to stay a bit neutral, and I just love these old French tureens. I got started because I wanted to make tureens for our shops, and I started collecting different ones because I wanted a handle from this one, and a top from this one, this and that. So I started collecting a bunch of them, and the next thing I know, I have like 20 of them. I think about decorating in a bit of perhaps an offbeat way, because I am just a very passionate shopper, and I love objects, I love things, I love stories, I love people who make things, And for me, the most exciting thing in the world is to find somebody who either collects things, or old things, in a very particular way, or recognizes the value of old things and brings value to it through their collection that I didn't notice before, or someone who can, just invent something whole cloth. And so I've been collecting forever, and that drives my interior design, if you want to call it interior design. And then less so now that I'm getting old, but I used to love just moving things around all the time because you saw things anew. I'm someone that believes that there's like a spirited element to things, that things that have a certain life, and if you move them and change them, you see them in a whole new way. I like to just see my own past, our past, and celebrate the times and the places that I've been. So I just want to see the things that I love in front of me all the time, and I want to rediscover them anew. I guess the lucky thing is that there's a consistency to my eye. So I'm not going off in completely crazy different directions, even though there might be very different periods. There is a certain sense of order to what I'm buying. One of the things that I love about country houses, old houses, and having lived in New York most of my life, New York City, every square inch is accounted for. And it's wonderful how in the countryside there are these sort of spaces that you're not quite sure what they were about or why they needed all this space and devoted to things that are no longer relevant. But they have this wonderful hallway. I'm very into recycling everything. All these slates, the brackets, many things around the house. Anything structural was found on the property. There's a lot of sort of little outbuildings and rooms that are filled with old stuff. So of course I love all that. So this was just a great place to put excess cooking things. What I was saying, how I love architectural things. Years ago I bought lots of these old radiators. I just think it's just an extraordinary bit of architecture or design, not architecture. It's very sort of machine age thing, and I never thought that I'd actually have it working, but I had this brilliant plumber here. He goes, "Oh, Keith, I'll get that working, no problem." And so the issue is that it is very hot. It should be in an enormous room and not a hallway. And then I'm totally into gardening, and I love flowers. So this was 100 years ago or 200. This was a flower room, but then it just became something else entirely. But I found in the old plans that it was actually a flower room. So I returned it back to being a flower room, and it's just incredibly functional. So just found this wonderful old sink and these wonderful old taps, and it's just it's an inspired place to do flowers. And then my friend Leslie Ashman, who I mentioned earlier, made my pillows, also does these extraordinary paintings. She buys antique paintings in the market, and then she goes home and weaves in fabrics and creates these I think quite extraordinary paintings. This is just this wonderful chair bought years ago from my friend David, and it's an old tractor seat that's been made into a Windsor chair. So it's a bit of, I guess, folk art, really, but I think just incredibly elegant. This is Baba, and Baba is a dream, a total dream. And she loves to lean on me all the time. She leans on me all the time, which I love. So this is a funny room that we're going to go into because this next room, because we use it as our day-to-day entrance, but I didn't know this room existed. Because when we saw the house, it was actually sealed off. This was sealed off. And I know it seems very strange that I didn't know this room, but I didn't know it did. And I was finally got all the old plans, and I said, wait a minute. So now we use this as our entrance, but it's a boot room, which is like when you live in the countryside, you're always coming in with muddy boots and muddy dogs, and so you have a boot room. If fortunate enough to have a boot room, and you can get all the mud off you. And again, with finding something, if you really, as I keep saying, manifest it or whatever the word. So there was in this fireplace, there was back in the day an old stove, and I had a drawing of what this room was, but I thought, what are the chances of finding a stove that would fit? And sure enough, I found one, and it's a completely wood-fired stove. And I use it as a fireplace on occasion, just because it's very nice to come in to the fire. But it does actually function as an oven. So, and this was a birthday present that I gave to Glenn. It's another John O'Reilly sculpture of a horse basically just being born, which we've had many now. I've seen several being born right here now on our property, because we're breeding horses. Incredibly kind people that live here. There's a man he's 92 years old, and he asked me if I wanted a model of our house. And I said absolutely yes, because I know he's brilliant at it. And it took him, I don't know, months and months, because he measured every window, every tiny detail, and it's 100% accurate. And when I asked him what I owed him, he absolutely refused to be paid. He said, I'm 92 years old, I don't need the money. I said, what charity do you love? What can I do for you? That's ridiculous. But he just loves making things at 92. I mean, what an unbelievable blessing. And then, unlike my unlikely passions, this is another radiator, but this one is known as a horse jump radiator, because it looks like out in the field, what you jump your horses over. What really surprised me about our move, and I've always loved England. I've always loved English humor, but I thought, okay, we're moving to really the countryside, and it's not the countryside that I knew, or where people from London were weekending. Well, I quickly learned, and the best part about the house is our friends here. The day that we moved in, people were coming over with jam that they made. I mean, this local fellow who makes his own honey came over with honey. Somebody else brought a pie. I mean, it was incredible. I've lived in lots and lots of places. We've never been so well received. I was worried, we're a gay couple, we're moving to deep countryside. Could not have been less of an issue. We've been so welcome to the community here, and we're so grateful. And we love to do charity events at the house, and we love to have big garden parties in support of the community. We have the garden open for the National Garden Scheme. So we're very involved in the community, and that's a big part of our enjoyment of the house. So as I said, one of the reasons why we wanted the house was for the garden. This was just a lawn before, and so we created a fountain It's just always nice to have wonderful running water. I took a cue from other parts of the surrounding of the house with the stones, and I went on the hunt for old stones and put in detailing and circles and just all sorts of small details that were in the house in other parts of the garden, just to maintain the integrity of that. It's actually it's a later sort of thing. There's a designer named Lutyens, and that was sort of a very kind of Lutyens-inspired thing that was done to the house. I'm not sure exactly when, but I went with that theme because I love that work. I'll tell you, when we first came to the house, it certainly looked like it ticked the boxes, just from the outside, but looks can be deceiving. And then we walked into the front entrance hall, and there's a cantilevered staircase, stone staircase, that seems to defy gravity. And I can't really describe what makes it stand up, because it's only into the wall about this much. And it basically is hanging there in this crazy geometry of one on top of the other, everything supporting the whole. And I often think when I'm walking down, is this the last time anyone's going to walk on this staircase? It just seems impossible, but it is a beautiful thing to behold, and the ironwork and the strap work, and I just thought the quality just jumped out at me. And so that was my first feeling of falling in love. And then I walked into the library, and the round room with the rounded windows and the scale of the ceilings, and it just really worked for me. There was no question in my mind that this was going to be our house. Okay, so this is our library. There are some kind of interesting objects here. This chair I bought many, many years ago from a young guy at the time. We were both younger, Julian Mayer. And what's incredible about it is he designed it on computer, and it's a Queen Anne chair, but it's all just slices of plywood, and then just all sort of glued up to become what I think is quite a beautiful interpretation of a Queen Anne chair. These are crazy. I mean, this is a love-hate thing for some, but they're actually, I was walking down the street with one of my oldest friends, Patty, and they were tearing up the street in New York City, and these were subway grates. So basically, they're in the sidewalk and letting light down into the subway. So they're, I don't know when they were from. They're probably from the turn of the last century. So I hailed down a guy who had a flatbed truck just driving by, and I said, I bribed him into dropping them down at my house, and which wasn't too far away, but they were impossible to carry them, absolutely impossible. They weigh a ton. Then I have some of my favorite things are one of my dearest friends, his name is David Grocott, and David can reinvent something that's very familiar and old and make it seem entirely new and special and interesting. And it's a quality that I have tremendous admiration for, and David is just awesome. So he took this old Chesterfield sofa and he recovered it in Mary Marco. And I just think, it could be something very humdrum, but here it is, and I think it looks wonderful. And then I have these terracotta, one's a dog and one is sort of a fox. And these were finials on top of a big old Irish house and they found their way, thankfully, I guess the house was taken down, and these are some of the artifacts that were saved. And I just adore them. Like this one is so sweet. You just look at her, and she reminds me of a dog that I used to have named Orbit, who was just like an angel. And then this fellow is definitely a bit devilish. Fortunately, I didn't have a dog like him. All my dogs have been sweet, but I do have a certain admiration for his, devil may care attitude. And then I have this wonderful goat. I've spent a good part of my life in India, and there are certain holidays that the villagers will go out and paint all their goats, and just paint the animals, the elephants, the goats, and in these incredible patterns. He was a wonderful artist, and he recreated them in plaster, and so I bought some. I couldn't resist them. I just thought they were wonderful. This is a maquette for tapestry. I was at a really basic flea market, like more of just a junk garage, more of a garage sale than full-on market. But somebody pulled up with a truck, and this was in a roll, and he rolled it out onto the ground, and I saw it, and like, antique dealers, those bastards, they all have eyes behind their head, as I do, and we all spotted it at the same moment. And there's a rule that if you have your finger on it first, then you get to try and buy it first. And until you take your hand off of it, everybody stays away. So I don't know how I did it, fitter days. I got to it first and bought it, and I don't know. It's just, of course, it's dogs. It's old, it's beautiful. So I just prized it forever. Loved it forever. And then a lot of my life was looking to make things for the stores. So I bought this old sofa at a fair called the Battersea Fair in London. As a decorative fair, it's quite, it's a great one to visit because it's an incredible designer resource, and you'll find objects, absolutely beautiful objects. And I went there and I found this sofa. So I sent it to North Carolina, and basically we tried to do as faithful a reproduction of it as we could. And this became our best-selling sofa for many, many years. It was called the Cotswolds sofa. And I would never buy something that I wouldn't have in my own home. And so that's how I always set about. I would think, okay, where am I going to put that? Where am I going to put that in my own home? It has to ring true to me, also, or it's going to feel false. So that was my drive. That was always in my head. And when I saw this sofa, well, obviously it is me because here it is. Many, many years later, I still have it. The wall color is a Farrow and Ball paint. I stayed in the fellow's name is Tom, who basically founded Farrow and Ball, and I stayed at his house in Scotland. And one of the rooms was this color, and I thought, well, it's going to work for me. But I don't know. Lately, I'm thinking about stronger colors. I'm just feeling like I want to be really like I'm going to repaint. We've been here for 8 years, so I'm like, no, next paint job is going to be I'm going to ramp it up. This lamp is sort of a cool object. It's rock crystals, and there was a famous place in New York. I don't think it's existed for a long time. If they still exist, I'm sorry, but it's called Carol Stupel, and they made these lights in the 50s. Again, it was one of those things that I remember when I was a kid, that I wanted one. I loved that. I wanted that. And what I said about something else, just manifest it, just think it, and I found one. So just a lucky find, and a cool object. This is an overhead light, and it's this fellow named Mark Antonio, who is one of the most endlessly creative people I've ever met in my life. He's just extraordinary. He's come up with ideas. You would have, I'll bet a lot of people watching Homeworthy would recognize some of Mark Antonio's products because he's so original and he's gotten into shops across the world. But I met him when he was a kid. I gave him a show in our Rockefeller Center store, a big exhibition of his work, and we remained friends. The one thing I don't like is when people entirely give their home over to an interior designer or a retail concept or a new fad. I want to see the person. I always want to feel the person when I go into a home. I mean, there are a lot of people who just don't really even care, which I find utterly indecipherable. I can't quite imagine that people just don't care. But then I'm like, I mean, there's different strokes for different folks, but I relate to people who are passionate about their homes. I'm going to take you into the entrance hall, which is the place that really got us to love the house right away. This is pretty special. So when we came into the house the first time, this is what we walked into, this extraordinary staircase. And it's stone, and it only goes into the wall about that deep. And yet somehow, this thing has been standing here for a couple hundred years. I really don't understand the science behind it, but I've been up and down enough times to realize it's going to stay, but it's all just leaning on each other and creating this enormous strength and beauty. So I just looked at the detailing, the ebony ribbing into the baluster, and it just spoke quality. And then I have this chair that I'm kind of obsessed with. I got this at Rosanna Orlandi, who is an incredible resource in Milan. Rosanna recognizes talent faster, earlier than anybody does. She is a force in the creative world and people who make objects. There's nobody higher than Rosanna. She's amazing. And she introduced me to Nacho. And what's fun about this chair, it's a lover's chair, which of course isn't that obvious. Well, no, it's not obvious, but the idea is that you can sit here and the person that you're having a relationship with can be in the other side, and you can be holding hands inside and no one would be the wiser that you got something going on. So, and then the idea that you stay true to certain artists, I always would check back, what's Julian, who made that sliced wood chair in my library, what's he up to? And he's making these chairs. It's good in the hallway because you're not going to linger, you're not going to spend all day there, but actually, it's not bad. But I wouldn't watch television on it, It's actually not a long show anyway, but I just think I absolutely love looking at it. And then this speaker is actually made of pottery, and it's made by the two Swedish ladies that made the books inside. And then up above us, these photographs are all of our horses, or Glenn's favorite horses. Glenn was a hunter jumper, a horseback rider, and he was really, really very, very good at the sport. I think he was the #1 in the sport, amateur owner for years. And we actually brought all these guys with us. They're all retired, but we brought them with us from the States, and they're living in our garden right now. So they're retired, so they're just munching on grass and leading their best life. But Glenn loves them to pieces, and I love just having them out there. Interesting thing about the door is, well, and it echoes some of the detailing on the outside of the house. This, Greek motif. And in fact, what I used some of that when I redid the fireplace in the drawing room. You can see that this motif is repeated in the fireplace. So this is our bedroom. It's got a few things in it that I really do love. This cupboard, or if you can call it a cabinet, it doesn't hold very much. It's something that I bought at a student fair. The bed is a bed from India. When I bought it, it was described as a Maharaja's bed, but I've seen a lot of these beds, and there are way more of these beds than there are Maharajas. But still, it's a great size, and it often winds up with 3 dogs and Glenn and I, so we need a Maharaja-sized bed. I had this wonderful guy who's since passed away so sadly because he's so creative. When we got married, I wanted to make tablecloths for this boat that we got married on. And we were experimenting with different things, and he knew how much Glenn loved horses. And there's this photographer from early days, a photographer who studied, who took, discovered that how horses actually ran, because before photography, when they galloped, it was so fast that people didn't really understand how horses ran. And so he took, his name was Edward Muybridge, and he took a book of old Edward Muybridge photos and then created them exactly his process, I can't tell you. But I just was enchanted by what he could do, and he made a whole bunch of things for me. So this is our bathroom, no surprise. And basically I wanted to center it on the view. It's quite a luxury being retired and being able to take a long bath is quite a luxury. And then looking out and seeing the view. It's quite a nice thing. And reflecting the view this way is another view this way, photographed by a young photographer that we just got. His name is Finn Gibson, and that's in Scotland. I had the sink made, a bit reflecting the cabinet downstairs, a bit Gothic revival. And the wallpaper is actually marbleized paper. So it's a couple hundred of individual sheets of paper that have been just all put together. So it's quite a unique thing. The horses it's just an old etching plate. This is a towel warmer. Again, with the horse theme, it just reminded me of a saddle rack. And I just love the scale of it. It's just so chunky, and so I found it irresistible. So, the word home, it's really mostly about people. Just wanting to create an environment that people will come over and be happy in, and feel comfortable in. It's not about it's hopefully not about showing off, although, this is a big house and I could be that, and I don't want that. It should be just a place where people are always happy to come back to, because they know that it's just a welcoming environment. And that's where I always want to come back to. I traveled so much for so long. I traveled 6 months a year for 25 years for my job. And I loved every moment of it. But now, home has another special resonance, because I don't want to leave. I've discovered gardening. I guess it shows I'm getting old. And of course, mostly, home is where my dogs are, so that is tremendously important to me. Thank you guys so much for coming and watching, and I do love sharing all of the memories that I have of the things in the house and how the place has evolved. So again, thank you so much, and gotta run. Bye-bye.
Hi Homeworthy, I'm Nadine Finnegan and this is Oscar. Welcome to our barn in the Cotswolds.
You're watching Homeworthy, where we believe every home has a story.
Hi, I'm Nadine Finnegan. I'm an interior designer. I have a studio called Decorate and we are in our barn in the Cotswolds. And I guess I've always had a personal dream of living in the Cotswolds, and it's a dream that my husband has come along with. We accidentally found ourselves out in the Cotswolds during the pandemic. We had a lovely weekend cottage in a little village close to Burford, which kind of became our sanctuary in that time. We were previously living in London, and that's where my husband and I met. And I guess with life changing and circumstances, we decided to make a complete lifestyle shift. And after coming out of the back end pandemic hangover, we decided to move to the Cotswolds and make it our permanent home. So we first saw the barn during the summer, July 2023 specifically. Unfortunately, at the time, we lost out to another set of buyers, which left us feeling a little bit heartbroken. But I guess, as my mother always says, what's meant for you won't pass you by. And 5 months later, we got the call from the realtor asking us whether we were still interested in the property, and we obviously jumped at the chance, and the rest is history. We decided that a barn was the layout we really wanted. In London, my husband and I had been living in a really beautiful riverside apartment, which was very light-filled and really very much about lateral living. And so in the country, our sort of collective dream was to find a property where we had that feeling of space and lateral living being, kind of high on the list of priorities. And for me, I would love to live in a cottage for like the rest of my days, but my husband's very tall and likes space, so this is kind of the compromise really. But we both love barns, and we love the charm and the history, and as much as I guess the designer in me wanted to, buy a piece of land and develop a barn from scratch, my husband sort of reined me in on that. And so for us, it was a case of let's find a barn that isn't necessarily turnkey, but is needing a little bit of TLC and a place that's already built and that we could put our touch to. So here we are in our formal entrance hallway. This space, we really wanted to feel like it gave you a bit of an immediate hug when you walked into the house. Our guests will flow through the front or through the back door, but when they do come through this way, we kind of like want it to feel instantly like, they're home, and everyone feels super chill. And we went for a colour that we felt really like enveloped the space and added a real sense of warmth. This is a fantastic shade of blue from Edward Bulmer, which is called Tingray. And it's like a sort of Air Force blue. It's got a bit of grey in it, but I love the tone. And Edward Bulmer, I think, is just a genius when it comes to colour palette. So we really felt that by bringing in that tongue and groove, that we were, creating again a layer of, rustic and charm and bringing, I guess, something that, perhaps could have been here, a long time ago, sort of giving that feeling really of it feeling quite timeless and something that not necessarily is a new piece. So we wanted it to feel like it had kind of always been here. Moving on to some of the art that we have chosen for this particular space. My husband and I didn't want this room to feel like it was overly hung with pieces, because obviously the tongue and groove is kind of what does the talking. But we've got a really special piece here, which was actually a wedding gift from the artist, who we are very, very dear friends of ours. The artist is, he's Colombian, Ariel Chavara Avila, and he's super, super talented. He has actually exhibited globally and he's won awards, but he's a dear friend, as I said, and this piece is just so incredible. I'm a huge fan of abstract, and it's kind of my absolute kind of genre, my go-to. So we were obviously very thrilled when we got this, and I framed it in just a really lovely, simple bamboo frame, which I think just really kind of allows the picture really to do all the talking. You'll notice in most of the rooms that I take you through that we have a lot of like sea and boat, and the reason being is my husband is a very keen sailor, so I kind of like that always to be a little bit of a nod to, you know, things that feel really close to our hearts. And here we've got a really beautiful watercolor, which I love, and I think it's really soft, and it kind of feels like a really nice juxtaposition between the abstract piece and that piece. A piece that I brought from my sort of single life, because of course this is a home that, you know, really actually my husband and I have kind of, you know, merged our things together. Not everything came with us, but the pieces that did are the pieces that we absolutely love. And this is a gorgeous antique French light, which actually was a pair, but sadly the other one got damaged. So I feel like it works really nicely here, and it's just beautiful cut glass, gorgeous detail. And then I just had a fermoir fabric lampshade made. I work really closely with this amazing lampshade maker. She's incredible. She's an absolute dream, and she created this, which I think is really, really pretty, and it just feels like it kind of complements the kilim, which again, you know, we've got kilims throughout the house. They're just so brilliant. They're really an inexpensive way of kind of creating, you know, bringing in pattern and creating, you know, texture and warmth. And I think they are so great, especially if you have dogs and lots of tread, and you know, you don't need to be too precious about stepping on them with, you know, shoes. This is a lovely antique table from China, from a fantastic local antique dealer who always just has the best eye, and he's a real resource for me. And his shop is in Shipston on Stour, so it's very local and always very tempting to buy pieces. And a little treasured piece here from John Darien from my big sister, who bought this for me one Christmas, and I love it. Again, I love seashells, my husband loves sea and boats, so, you know, it's a great motif. This bench is really special to us. This was salvaged in Ireland actually by my late mother-in-law, Angus's mother, and it's such a beautiful piece. It's just, I love the shape of it. I love the Gothic detail, the colour of it. So many benches that you sometimes see from churches are quite dark wood, whereas I just think this is kind of that nice like light oak, but it's just got amazing patina, and yeah, we just love it so much, and it just feels like it was meant to be in this spot and live in this spot. So we're really, really pleased with this. It feels like it's kind of finally found its home. And then on the cushion, we've just used an Ian Mankin stripe there. I love stripes. I'm obsessed with stripes. I'd probably have a stripy house if I could. And then we've got a newer piece here, just a Nakuku antique brass lamp and a barn mirror, which I just thought was kind of a cute way of just giving a little nod to being in a barn. You know, that's kind of gives you that sort of impression that it's like a barn window. So it was just to bring in a little element of that. And this is a piece I've had for a long, long time. I think probably owned it for about 15 years. It's a lovely, again, it's a vintage French antique coat hanger. And I think the colours are just gorgeous, and it's kind of really worn, and it just really works in this space. So of course, every hallway needs a place to put your umbrellas, a place to put your coats, a place to put dog leads, and this particular umbrella stand is an antique piece. and actually made not that far away. I think it's a mid-century piece, and it was made in Birmingham. I love it because of the sort of utilitarian aspect to it, but I love the fact that they've used this sort of faux bamboo, which I'm obsessed with, and I always have been. So anything with bamboo really always speaks to me. And through here we have our guest cloakroom, which is very small but perfectly formed. I've really used this space just to hang some really sweet art. We've got all of our past doggies in heaven on the wall. So it's a little bit of a homage to them. And then we've got some other artworks around. I'm obsessed with this mirror. I love lattice detail. And this is a particular piece that I just would like to recreate one day, actually, because I think it makes such a fine mirror. It was a frame originally, and I just had it sort of redone to include some mirror. We obviously continued the tongue and groove into here, but didn't want to do it in a sort of sense where we were going full scale. So it was more sort of the sort of half room effect. But what I did want to add is a little bit of a pop of tile, and these are so sweet, and I was desperate to use them. And these are from Belinium, and they're hand painted in Italy. And I just love the leaf detail, and it's almost like a trellis effect. I think it's so clever, and what Sarah and her team create are just brilliant. And now I'm going to take you through to our kitchen dining space. So this space is very much the nucleus of the house, and I love that it is very much the room that you find centrally located, so you can access all parts of the home from here. I think for us it was really important that this space felt less kitcheny and more like a lifestyle place. Obviously we love to cook, we love to host, we love to entertain, but I guess the challenge of having open plan is to almost compartmentalize the zones. We inherited this kitchen actually, so what we did here was I guess we took a more minimal approach to the tweaks, but what was really important is to get the color right. So we worked with a fantastic company who actually resprayed all of the units into this really fantastic color. This is Little Green's sage green, which is just a go-to. I use it on quite a lot of client projects. I love it. I think it really sort of exudes country. And I think it's a really timeless color as well. And I know green kitchens obviously are kind of having a bit of a moment, but for me, they're very country classic. And feels like it's kind of a good future-proof color. As I said, the kitchen was something that we inherited. It was, beautifully made German custom creation. It would have just been totally criminal to rip it out and remove it. And it was, I feel really happy that we were able to give it a new lease of life. And just make some, very small differences and tweaks. So we installed this hob, for example, and changed the countertop, and then obviously certain hardware changes. So again, I think there's a lot you can do with what you have, and we shouldn't be so quick to always kind of rip things out. We do use this space a lot with lots of family visiting and hosting Christmas every other year is kind of our thing. And believe it or not, we actually have had 14 people around this table with a slight extension. But usually I'd say we're kind of entertaining 6 to 8. So it's kind of much more manageable, really. In terms of like the details that we have here, I mean, I love to include art, and these are just some smaller pieces that I just think really, just pop. You'll notice like a theme through the house is we've just gone for one paint color, which is we've used on a continuum, apart from the formal entrance where we've used the blue. We've used a color from Farrow & Ball called Dimity, which I think is just such an amazing kind of blank canvas color. I knew that we were going to hang a lot of art, and so for me it's just the perfect backdrop to that. So just going back to some of the pieces we have, a lot of the artists are unknown, but I just love like the fun and frivolity of this piece here, which is, I believe, a French artist painted that. And this is a Cornish artist, and actually that piece is as well, and that piece. And so, yeah, it's just kind of mixing things together. I always say I'm not an art snob. I think if you love something, buy it. You can reframe it. I always say make friends with your framer, because they will become a great resource. I know I keep mine very busy. And then, as you can see, I love ceramics. So this is a very old piece that I acquired in my sort of 20s when I started to really discover majolica. And I think it's really cute. I love Delft, so these are from that region, and I think they're really quite beautiful. This is a piece that we brought back from Austria, actually, because we have a place there in Kitzbühel, and anything wicker really always speaks to me. But I just love the fact it's an urn, and I think it's really quite special. This is a piece another ceramic piece that I absolutely love, and it just kind of reminds me of Italy. This is a piece that my parents-in-law gifted to us, and we love that. And then obviously we've got some cookbooks, and this is obviously very helpful when I try to cook. Over here, some more ceramics, another piece that we brought back from Austria. And we have just like various, again, a little nod to my husband's sailing there with a little anchor, which is a cute little bottle opener. And then lots of like little vintage pieces. These came from a French flea market, which I think are really quite cute. So I think it's just always really nice to mix things that just add a little bit more character. And then we've got some great plates, which we brought back from our mini moon to Portugal, which I think look really pretty there. And this lampshade is quite old now, but it's from Samarkand Design. And they create the most amazing lampshades using old saris. And I think it's really, really quite pretty. It's quite faded now, but I kind of think it adds to the charm. And again, a little bit of a nod to bamboo here with the lamp base. And this is also actually another Samarkand Design lampshade here, which I think is really quite chic. And then just a little bit more of the sort of, pieces that we like to surround ourselves with. This actually came back from us from a trip to Jamaica recently, which I think is just so fun. He's quite fun that it's double-sided as well, which often, the devil is always in the detail, isn't it? It's often not the case. And this guy, we met his father actually, and he had carved it by hand, and I love that. I think it's lovely to know the provenance of the pieces that you buy. You don't always, but when you do, I think it feels extra special. So we love him. In fact, I think we need to name him. These pieces are, again, other ceramics, gifts. My big sister kind of always knows what I like. She always buys me great ceramics, so she's actually the person that brought these two lovely, lovely items into my life. This came from Marrakesh, from Shabby Chic. I love Marrakesh. I think it's one of those places where, it's just a voyage of discovery. It's sensorial overload. So a lot of inspiration is definitely to be found there. And the artisans, I think, are just second to none. So this is a piece from there. This travelled back from Paxos with us, actually. I always try to leave a bit of extra space for these treasures. And this piece came from Corfu Old Town. So yeah, the ceramics, I feel like, tell their own story. They've all acquired their own sort of air miles, really. And then to our dining table, which is very informal, and I think it's really nice that we can add extra seating. And as I said, we've often extended it and kind of hidden everything with tablecloths. But I love the fact that it's just very chill when people come, and we've got the kids or the adults, and everyone can just, kind of bundle up together around the table. And this piece is actually just from a flea market, but I just absolutely love it. I think it's Italian, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. So I really didn't want to kind of create that sort of cliche country look, but I I do love those nods, and for me it's like a great check, a great gingham. So this is a really fantastic blue check that Ian Mankin designed, and I think it's fantastic with a little pop of red. I think it just looks really, really cute. And actually, for the blind, I love to sometimes find old rolls of discontinued or, you know, fabrics that, you know, are just not being made. And this is a Colfax and Fowler gingham, which I found a roll actually really luckily on eBay, which was like winning the lottery. And then I had it made up. So you'll see it's kind of a very, it's a smaller scale check to the bench check, but I think it works really nicely together. So I think for us, when you think about a barn, you think about all of those incredible details that will be there. The beams really are kind of a big part of that for us. The beams in this room, I think, are just really, really so stunning. And, you know, we love the fact that it's kind of in a very natural oak. So many beams sometimes that you sort of see in properties are painted, and for us it's we were just so happy to see them really kind of come to life here in their sort of more natural sense. You'll see details across the windows as well, kind of throughout the house, really, where they've kind of used pieces of, I guess, the original beams. But definitely for us, it's nice that we have the beams in sort of running through the ground floor. Upstairs is kind of really where the beams kind of do talking in much more of a sort of grand way. But we do love the fact that they do bring so much charm and so much warmth to the ground floor space. This guy, there's a story attached to him. So my husband and I got married in a really beautiful place in the Cotswolds called Thyme, and Thyme and the Thyme estate is kind of surrounded by these incredible sheep, and actually within the estate, it's the most magnificent, chic and magical hotel with awesome interiors. Really, really a place that I always recommend people to visit when they come to the Cotswolds, because the owners just have the most exquisite taste. And actually in the bar area, they have these amazing sheep chairs. So we were very much kind of inspired by that. But actually, my husband and I have a place in Austria, and this actually came from Austria. So they're actually made locally to us in a place called Kitzbühel. And we just love him. And he's got the little bell. And he actually came back with us on a road trip where Oscar was in one seat and he was in another. So he really, really has, again, done his kind of fair share of traveling. But I feel like he's found his home here in the Cotswolds, and yeah, we love him. He's kind of very much a little bit of a security when you're coming in and going into the lounge. I'm obsessed with French antiques, and I really just fell for this table. I love the patina. I just love the history, and you know, someone might say rusty table, I say charm, and the detail is just so pretty. And I think I don't really kind of subscribe to kind of the uber feminine, you know, look, but I love those elements that really do soften it. So I think it's a really beautiful piece, and I'm really happy with its corner that we found for it. I think, you know, with any home, you're always trying to max every square inch, and this felt really quite right for it's the sort of, you know, extension to the kitchen area. We inherited an element of it, but actually our builder kind of very cleverly tweaked it according to our taste, so that we could, you know, display books, and that's a little nook for the dogs. And then it's just a natural place really to have a little bar section set up, which is always quite nice, and kind of being a separate zone to the main kitchen. But I also love the fact that we went for a paint colour that feels a little bit unexpected. It feels like it really works nicely with the terracotta tiles that we have in the room. And I love a pop of red. So growing up, I spent a lot of time in France with my parents. And again, you know, I've spoken to my love of abstract. I just love Picasso. And these pieces are so beautiful. And these actually, this is a lithograph signed, which is of a place that I spent a lot of time visiting, and it's called Antibes. And I just, again, I love the colours. I think it's really cute, and I think it just adds a little bit of fun to that specific spot. And we've got just a pair of them there, and I think they just look really nice in that spot. So when we first arrived, I think we decided to give ourselves 2 to 3 months just to kind of get to find our feet and just kind of understand the lay of the land. I think you have to really start to understand the home before you can start any kind of, you know, musing over work. For us, it was a case of making, rather than kind of full refurbishment, it was a case of us making some tweaks and some light renovations. Some more intense renovations obviously did take place as we sort of started to discover things. But I think for us, it was really important that we were retaining the original charm of the barn, but also bringing some new elements into it, just to kind of almost give it a feeling of kind of more rustico elements. So for example, we've installed tongue and groove into our formal hallway, which we feel really adds like a layer of depth and just kind of a coziness, really. And that space was previously wallpapered. So it was just kind of being really smart with our choices. The house had been really well loved and lived in by the previous owners, and it was clearly a really happy place. So we were really, really lucky to be able to take it on and become the custodians. So I think for us, this room, the starting point was the sofa and the table. My husband and I were looking at kind of, you know, layouts and the type of vibe we wanted. This was kind of, for us, the first room that we started to scheme. And we looked at some tables at Burford Antiques, which were Indian coffee tables, and he loved that. So I knew that we were kind of on the right track. So this piece actually came from Indigo Antiques, and they are an incredible resource for Asian and Indian antiquities based in Wiltshire. And this table arrived, and I knew kind of scale-wise it worked. And then from there we kind of went to sofa choices. This sofa came from Soho Home. We wanted to make sure that we had a sofa that just is super comfortable. You can put your feet up on, you know, the dogs can jump up on, the children visiting. So, you know, we're not precious at all. So this is very much kind of the place where you can relax and lounge. And this one is adorned with a couple of different cushion choices. So this is Sanderson fabric, and this one is also Sanderson, but it's a collaboration they did with Salvas and Graham. And this is a Ian Mankin ticking stripe, which I think is fantastic. And I've used a lot of Ian Mankin fabrics throughout the house. The coffee table, I love to kind of, you know, add trinkets to, sometimes to my husband's annoyance, but I do think that, you know, kind of coffee table curation is something that I just love to do, and I think most people would agree. So lots of crystals, candles, matches, plants, books, things that you just want to surround yourself with, really. Yeah, this is kind of a ever evolving and moving moment, I'd say. We've got a separate armchair as well, which actually was a piece that my husband had acquired many years ago. So we wanted to make sure that we used that. And I like the fact that we've got, again, that juxtaposition of the kind of, you know, more sort of masculine leather club chair with some of the softer pieces. And this is again, a real kind of nod to my bamboo love. This is an antique piano stool that's been reupholstered a few times. And actually my upholsterer told me last time it couldn't be done again because it is now quite fragile. So this, I feel, is probably its last fabric moment. But I couldn't resist the Colfax and Fowler squiggle, which I absolutely love. So I feel like that really works nicely in that spot. Over here we have beautiful Suzanne, which we've hung. Some people like choose to stretch them on canvases. I think they look, beautiful on rails. And this is, I just love the colours, the pomegranates. I think it's just exquisite. And it just really, really pops on the wall. And of course, we've kind of got a various array of books and ceramics. And this piece actually, again, we always like to buy when we're traveling. This piece came from Portugal, which is a bit of a nod to the sea with a fish. Some of the other pieces actually we inherited from my parents-in-law, the ceramic fruits, which I just think are divine. And the starfish came back from Jamaica with us recently, which are lovely. And just really, again, add a little bit of a holiday reminder to our sort of setup. My parents actually bought this piece when we lived in the south of France, and so I feel like it's a real kind of treasured possession. And I love how it just sits there. Feels like it's kind of the centerpiece of that particular setup. These are just very inexpensive lampshades from Pookie. Again, a bit of a nod to my wicker obsession. And yeah, just that feels like it's kind of constantly evolving, swapping books in and out, but kind of works as a really nice vignette. Another real treasured possession of mine is this malachite elephant, which came from Africa. My father used to do a lot of business in Zaire specifically in the 80s, and that piece is very heavy. It's travelled along to various parts of the world with us, but it's now living in the Cotswolds. And actually, I love elephants, and you'll see a few other little elephant moments throughout the barn. Actually, this is kind of very much our sort of family table of portraits, and again, I think this space, when we thought about it, how did we want to plan it out? Were we going to perhaps have two sofas? Actually, what I think and where we've landed in the kind of one sofa kind of sectional arrangement feels like we've kind of got another zone here. And then I quite like the fact you can travel around the back of the sofa with our lamps and our table. And we've got a little bookcase here, which is again an antique bamboo piece that I acquired around 2012. One of the pieces weren't very popular, and yeah, it's a really, really fine example of one of those pieces from the era. So I'm so happy to still have that in my life, and I think it looks great in this corner. This is a really special piece. This is a Miro lithograph. Juan Miro is one of my favourite artists. I think my kind of love affair with Juan Miro began at the age of 14 when I was studying art at school, and my husband actually brought that for me for my birthday a couple of years ago on a weekend trip to Amsterdam. So yeah, that also came home with us. This piece actually, my late mother-in-law was an artist, Wendy Finnegan, and she painted that in her later years, and I just love it. I love the, again, abstract really speaks to me, and I just love the fact that you can make of it what you wish, and so I often sit there staring at it, kind of coming up with new iterations of what I think it represents. But I just love that. It's really, really, really special to us. And another piece of Wendy's actually we've got over here, which is one of my husband's favourites and also mine. So that again kind of hangs pride of place, and I think just really looks divine actually on that wall. And this is a London artist, Naylan Laluk, which we've got quite a few of her pieces around the house. She paints a lot of nature, again in that sort of abstract way that I love. This curtain we used a Jane Churchill fabric with a lovely trim from Colfax and Fowler, and I like how the trim just kind of adds that element of interest to it, and it also feels like it works really nicely with our Killim rug, which, you know, obviously you've got the blues and the yellows, and the motif feels like it kind of is very complementary. This chair is a very old antique from France. I think what really spoke to me is the brass inlay pieces, the marquetry here, and this has been reupholstered in a Manuel canvas fabric actually, which I think looks like coral. So again, that kind of really speaks to me. This table is from the Kiku, and we've got some books and a little malachite chessboard, which is also from Africa as well, another piece that my father had brought back. This piece is 70s brutalist stool, which kind of uses the side table, which I think is always just very handy to have. But I just love the carved legs and the rope detail. Again, reminds me a little bit of a kind of, you know, it's got a bit of nautical nod. These lampshades came from La Corallina in Florence. And again, I love ICAT or ECAT, and I think they're really beautiful. They're printed onto paper, but I think they just look really quite impactful there, and they kind of pop when you walk into the room. So we've got another piece from Ariel Chavaro Avila, and we've had that one framed there, and I think it's just, yeah, it just has a lovely sense of movement to it, and we've just put that together with two other abstract pieces. This one is actually of mountains, which I adore, and this is an unknown artist, but I believe it's French origin. For me, when I'm thinking about a scheme, I don't personally subscribe to your art having to match your furniture or your fabric choices. That's not how I decorate. But I think a lot happens fairly accidentally at times. I always encourage people to mix their fabric prints. So if you're going for a stripe, you can soften it with something maybe more floral. I think what's really, really lovely is to kind of start with that piece. And for us, it was the table. And as you can see with this table, you've got green, you've got blue, you've got taupe, you've got quite a few colors, even some yellow. And so that was kind of the starting point for where we would go with the scheme in this room, and really just kind of eking out the colors. But I think, you know, with a lot of room design, it's sometimes trying and then try again, and don't be afraid to move things around. Or, you know, my husband often says, like, when will it ever be finished? And I say to him, never, because actually a home is constantly evolving, and we're constantly evolving. So why would it stand still? So my previous career was in public relations, and I guess I've always had an interest in art and in history. I read history at university. My parents also loved to redecorate our homes, and were really, really fortunate that we lived in various parts of the world. And so I've kind of drawn from all of that, I guess, formative stage of my life. And I think I probably had a little bit of a sort of eureka moment when I was lucky enough to visit the home of the notable designer Stephen Gambral, his Hamptons home, and I realised that this could be the life that I could lead in the way of kind of creating and creating things for clients. And I don't think I'd ever perhaps recognized that could have been a career path for me, you know, I guess 15 years previously when I started out, you know, in kind of thinking about where I wanted to go and which direction. So I'm a kind of great believer in life that you should always be a beginner at something. So when I came back from that trip, I decided to enroll, and I studied interior design for a year, and I got my diploma, and the rest is history. So I set up my studio, Decorate Interiors, in 2018, and it really very much began on a much smaller scale of just, you know, helping friends and family members out with perhaps rooms in their homes. And my big moment came in 2020 when I was asked to work on the full refurbishment and decoration of a very sizable home in the Cotswolds, and so that was a real turning point for me in my career, and I'll always be grateful for that opportunity. So moving from the kitchen into the garden studio room, this is now my office space. When we first arrived at the property, it was a very utilitarian boot room, and it was a space that felt almost a little bit wasted, just because it's just has the most glorious vantage over the garden, and it's kind of the perfect room really. It's kind of warm and cozy in the winter, it stays cool in the summer, so it's a great place to work, and it's a place where Oscar likes to hang out as well, when I'm doing calls or, you know, thinking about mood boards or whatever I'm happen to be doing. So I decided for this space to go for a circular table situation as opposed to kind of a traditional desk, just because it was, I think I really sort of wanted to enjoy the view, and the natural place to put a desk would have been to face the wall originally. And I just thought actually by putting a circular table in, it actually feels less officey, and a little bit more of an extension of the house. Also, I guess 80% of the room is my office, and then 20% is kind of the flow from, you know, as it is a backdoor flow. So it was just kind of felt like a really smart way to use the space. And obviously, like anyone's desk is always full of your treasures and things that, you know, make you really happy. And I've got lots of things here that I really treasure and love. And actually, my mother bought me this paperweight, which is the mountains in Tyrol, which again is a bit of a nod to Austria, and a really lovely piece, which I love seeing every day. My brother always says my spirit animal is Sophia from the Golden Girls, and I'm obsessed with the Golden Girls, so she always sits with me. And I think we all need to be a bit more Sophia, frankly, in life. I love crystals, and you'll see around the house I collect crystals I have since I was about 20. And this is just so gorgeous, and it's a heart shape as well, which I think is, yeah, feels really, really special. I've got lots of family pictures around. I love to surround myself with plants and great art. Another piece actually that is really special to me actually is my previous career as a PR. I was lucky enough to go to Rome for Valentino's 45th anniversary celebrations, and this is a very chic fan that I brought back, and so that lives on my desk, reminds me of my old life. This particular cushion fabric I'm obsessed with. It's a How fabric, now discontinued. I managed to find a very small amount on eBay that I quickly snapped up and had my wonderful upholsterer make as a cushion. So I think that just works really, really perfectly in here. This is kind of the pièce de la résistance. This piece is 18th century Indonesian cabinet. I think when I found it online, I hadn't appreciated the scale, but I'm so happy that it is as big as it actually is. When it arrived, it took 4 people to bring it into the house, but it was well worth it. And I think it's just absolutely exquisite. I love the colors, I love the details, the etchings, And I just feel like with anything, you know, kind of the more pattern and the more sort of distressed and, you know, lived in, the more it feels like it's kind of, you know, it's kind of speaking to you. Its history is really, you know, very obvious. This is a lovely piece from Africa, and again, little rattan wicker trim there, which I just think is so beautiful, and it's a very solid wood base. These came from Compton Marbling, which is, I believe they are based in Wiltshire, and they create the most lovely hand marbled papers, and they fashion them into these little light little lampshades for these sweet little antique lights, light bases. So these are French, and I just, again, it's that little sort of lattice detail I'm obsessed with. I think they're so pretty. So then just surrounding myself in here with lots of great art pieces. The prints, the botanical prints, are Renovation, which I just is just a constant source of inspiration to me. This is an unknown artist to me, but I just think it's just so exquisite, and I think they must be lilacs. It's so pretty. I love the colours. That was actually one of the first pieces I got for this room, and so kind of built the scheme very much around that piece. And then again, I just really like to mix pieces. So we've got obviously some botanical art, some abstract art, and then lots of ceramics around. I've collected blue and white china for years, and I've probably had to kind of pare back my blue and white obsession a little bit, particularly since building a home with my husband, but you definitely will still see touches throughout where I can get away with it. These are very old antique botanical prints. Again, I'm obsessed with ferns. I love to have ferns and geraniums, and those are kind of my go-to for indoor life. And they've just been sweetly framed in a little bamboo frame. This is a vintage Victorian lamp base. Again, it's really pretty. And this piece actually is very special to me because my grandfather actually, he was incredibly gifted. He hand carved all of the details, and you can see it's all little flowers. And it's just really, that's where I keep all my note cards. I love to letter write. I'm very old fashioned like that. I think everyone is always happy to receive something that's not a bill in the post, let's face it. So I do like to put pen to paper. Some of the other things that I have that are special, I'm half Welsh, so I love spoon. I've got them dotted around the house, but I love to always have one on my desk. And this is a really sweet, this was a gift from a close friend of mine, which I love. So this is the other side of the office space, which is, again, where a lot of our guests do come through, especially if they've parked up in our driveway. I love this piece. This is a antique etagere, but I love the way it has a little inlaid detail of the shell. Again, it's a little bit of a nod to the sea. This mirror is Indian antique, and I think it's just absolutely gorgeous. I love the distressed paint effect, and this is a piece that I brought back from Greece. I love evil eyes. I wear evil eyes, so it's all about protection. Another piece of art from Ariel Shavara Avila. I feel like every home needs to have a pineapple. It's the sign of welcome, and so for me that kind of is just the nod there. This umbrella stand again is another piece that we brought back from Austria with us, and again it just feels like it just works really nicely in this cute little entrance hallway. And we've got 2 pendant lights in here, which I think when I was designing the room, I did really kind of labour on lighting for this room, because I do love to have lots of, lamps as, throughout the house, but it was important to get the pendants right. But what I think I particularly loved about these is just that sort of, they very much are, they're neutral. They feel like they kind of always hung here. And I think they're just really chic, and you kind of could miss them, but if you spot them, I think people tend to comment that they really do like them. So they're from Jim Lawrence, and he's kind of the go-to for quite a lot of the lighting that I use throughout my projects. So here we are in our garden, which is actually the perfect size for us, because it's high maintenance but not high maintenance, if you know what I mean. We have a great gardener. The previous owners were incredibly green-thumbed, and just are responsible actually for planting everything in all its glory. So we're really lucky here, and the roses are just coming out now, to have such a beautiful display of David Austin roses, which are just exquisite, and they continue to sing throughout the summer, and just bring us so much joy and delight. And in another week's time, it'll just be a cacophony of colour. So we absolutely feel very blessed to live in a home that has such a gorgeous garden. We love to entertain. I think we probably do more entertaining in the summer than we do in the winter. And just because we like to be outside, my husband loves to barbecue. We can have 10, 12 people around the table. And so, yeah, we're already planning our summer series. For me, I think the sort of a successful home scheme is a sort of taking a 80-20 approach. So kind of 80% vintage, antiques, and 20% new. So that's kind of always my base starting point. I love to decorate with colour. I'm all about, joyful living, and, your home should obviously be a reflection of your personality. In this case, our personalities. I love to use pattern and textures, and I think it's really about creating a feeling rather than a look overall. I'm not about kind of being too matchy-matchy. I think that you should take risks, and I'm constantly moving things around. So, a painting that might, live in one room might not in 6 months' time, or an object. And I think we should kind of take the view that your home is actually like a bit of a set, and there's no kind of right or wrong way to place anything, and it's just kind of being led by your instincts. I love a place to feel really collected and obviously curated, to feel layered. I mean, warm and cozy is what we're all striving for, and you should ultimately be able to kick back and feel super relaxed in your home. So now I'm going to take you to the upstairs of the property. So we hung this piece quite recently. This was also painted by my late mother-in-law, Wendy Finnegan, and I just love the colours. I think it's just a vibrant mix of greens and blues, and I'm not traditionally a pink girl, but I just love how Wendy has brought some of those kind of more those colours out of my comfort zone into that palette. And so yeah, I'm so happy with this piece. Every time I climb the stairs, I take her in, and I think you can really kind of enjoy the majesty of this painting in its position. This bench is a Hungarian antique. I think it's really very sweet how it just sits quite unassuming, really, under this lovely painting. This is a really fun light lamp base from Pookie, and this wicker lampshade came from Calico, which I've had for a long time, and it's sort of kind of sat on various lamp bases in its life. This is a antique mirror, which I love because I particularly love this kind of inset canvas element, which it's really hard to find anyone to do that anymore. So for me, that kind of gives me Palm Beach vibes, which I just adore. This is a vintage Hermes scarf, which I had framed several years ago. So it's a piece that kind of came from my former life into this home. But I love the sort of foliage and the black breeze, and I think it really kind of screams autumn. And it's another season which I adore. And so that really feels like it has found its perfect place on the wall there. This fabric is from Linwood, and again it's a nod to my stripe obsession. I feel like the greens just look really elegant though in that particular window, particularly because it looks over the garden. So this is one of our guest rooms, kind of more blue themed, but I just absolutely love this particular piece on the wall. This is a lithograph that my parents-in-law brought back from Paris. So we've recently had it reframed, and I just think it just looks incredible above the headboard. This actually was the bed that we had when we lived in London. And again, I love just the sort of clean lines of the cane headboard. And so we've, brought that with us and kind of given it a new lease of life in the guest room. We have created some lovely cushions here for this particular guest suite. So this is a Sanderson fabric, and we've popped a little blue trim on it. And this is a really lovely embroidered fabric from Pierre Frey. So I think that just looks really, really elegant together. This is a Linwood fabric that I had created, that I had the quilt created with, and we also did a matching Roman blind just to kind of bring that into the window as well. So of course, as I've said already, can never resist a stripe. This is an Ian Mankin stripe for the ottoman at the end of the bed, and the kilim has come from India, and I just love the colours in this particular kilim. So this kilim was probably one of the last pieces actually that we installed in this room, and I think I probably drew a lot of inspiration from a lot of what was hanging on the walls, but I think it looks really, really beautiful and kind of just breaks up some of the other patterns in the room. So some of the artwork that we have in this corner, this is a lithograph by the French artist Hilaire, and I just love the playfulness of the circus ladies. I think it's just so fun. It's a piece that I bought about 10 years ago from a great shop, a gallery in London, King's Court Galleries in Fulham. And yeah, she's travelled with us, and I think looks great here. This little rattan chest has come from Stone Table Vintage. Victoria is the owner of that business, and she's got a really successful Instagram store and has such a great eye. So that's a piece that I love from there. We had this lampshade made with a Nina Campbell fabric. Again, it just kind of brings a sort of element of green and botanical into this space, and I think it looks really lovely with this piece of art hung next to it. This chair again is kind of very much kind of two of my loves, cane and faux bamboo. This cushion is from Les Ottomans, and then we've just got some sort of mix of art around. Again, the sea is never too far, or nor are the mountains. This particular table is a piece that I bought from eBay, actually. I think a lady had it in her garden, and I thought it would be absolutely stunning as a little side table for this particular room. So I'm really pleased with how that has turned out. Behind the side tables, we've got these lovely bamboo mirrors, and these are actually antique bamboo frames, and I just had them reset with an antique glass. I think they look really impactful, but when I first received those, they had very, very old silk sort of very sort of brown silk prints within them. So I feel like it's nice to give things a new life if you can. And you know, working with great people like a great framer or a great upholsterer, there's always kind of endless possibility to what you can do with these pieces. I love these lampshades. They're from Birdie Fortescue. She's really clever. We do use quite a few of her pieces throughout the property. And I think, you know, again, it's just a very lovely shade of blue. It just feels like it's quite soft, it's quite serene, and quite calming, actually. I think this room, as much as there's like a lot of art talking to you, it still feels like a place that you can just take a deep breath and hopefully relax in. So this is our other guest room. Again, we've kind of gone big on art, a lot of textiles, an injection of colour. This feels, you know, same but different. I guess more green coming through. And this kilim, I love the sort of checkerboard effect of it. This is a stunning cantha quilt from Chloe Jonathan. She's an absolute resource for canthas, and she's very, very. She has an incredible eye and has has beautiful things. So yeah, I think that works really nicely on this guest bed. It really kind of anchors the bed. This cushion is in a Schumacher fabric, which is like a paisley. This particular fabric we used for the headboard is from Linwood. And again, I've carried that over to the Roman blind. The side tables are French antique, and I love the rattan tops mixed with the metal bases. I think they're really smart. The lampshades are from Pookie, and they again I think are a collaboration between JPG Baker and Pookie. This particular piece was gifted to us from my mother. This particular bridge is a bridge that I drove over a lot as a child to visit my grandparents in Wales, and so it really feels quite close to my heart. So I love architectural drawings. I love technical drawings. It's not something I'm particularly good at, but I really admire when someone is. So I love that particular piece, and of course it has lots of childhood memories for me as well. So we've got a mix of art here. Again, a nod to the sea, the country, lovely botanical prints, and then a little bit more sort of abstract on this side. A bit of a mix of pieces, but all hopefully working well together. And this is kind of our gallery wall area. And I think people, when they stay in this room, really love waking up to the art. And actually it's quite often the case that over breakfast they'll really question us over the art. And yeah, I think it's a great way of starting conversation. And it's a lovely room. It's a cozy room. It's the smallest room in the house, but it's definitely a great guest room. So we're in the master bedroom. This particular mirror is something that I acquired in my mid-20s. It was kind of my first big furniture purchase. For me, it's a piece of art. It's Philippe Starck. It's absolutely magnificent. I love the scale. I think it just absolutely belongs in that section of the room. It's travelled with us a lot, and much to the sort of, you know, annoyance of many a removal van. But everyone's always been very gracious and delivered it with a lot of care and attention. But I'm glad it arrived here, and I just think it just looks amazing. This painting just really reminds me of our barn, actually. I feel like this is probably how it would have been before it became residential. It was a cowshed, so I just feel like that painting kind of feels like it was almost meant to be for this property. So I was really pleased when I found it on an auction site and I had it reframed. And I feel like this particular frame just kind of really picks up the beams that you can see around the place. I bought this painting for my husband as a gift. I think I've mentioned that we've got a place in Austria, and this feels like it could have been painted in the hamlet where we live there, which is incredible. It was painted in the 50s by an artist called Vogel, and we just love it. We look at it and it reminds us of our really happy times in Austria. And coming through to the main bedroom area, this is a French antique chest, which I absolutely adore. I love all of the details. I love the original hardware. I think it's just so special. And again, my obsession for blue and white, which has been slightly reined in these days. This is just a lovely example of a ginger jar. Another French antique. This is I love the shell motif on the actual mirror. We have another French antique chair here, which I think is wonderful with the cane. And this table actually is a martini table, which I was told by the antique seller that it came from the estate of the late Yves Saint Laurent from his Paris home. So I'm quite excited to think of the stories that table could tell if it could speak. This particular lamp is, again, one of the sort of earlier antique purchases I made, which I think is just exquisite. I love it. I love the detail. I guess I really do have an appreciation for French antiques and that era, it really speaks to me. This is again another bamboo piece. It's got like a beautiful, almost like a textural paper inserts within it, and it actually is kind of near on in perfect condition. So we absolutely love that piece. Really adore it. This is another lampshade I had made in a sewn fabric, which I think is wonderful, and it's actually been designed to mimic basket weave, which again is my nod to wicker. We inherited this lamp base from my parents, which I think just looks absolutely beautiful in here. My very dear girlfriend created this frame for us actually. It's an Anya Hindmarsh custom frame when we moved into our barn, so she created it for us, which is lovely, and something I really treasure. I love, again, ceramics, and this piece is by Fee Greening, and again it's a little nod to coral and the sea, and this dish is from Hermes, so it's a little vintage piece that I just use to store jewellery, etc. We've got some more art pieces here, again just a real mix of artists, unknown artists. I've had most of these pieces reframed, just because I think that so much of the beauty can really be drawn out with the right frame. This is a British artist called Noah Kelsey, who's kind of newer to me, but I just love his abstract pieces, so that's more of a recent acquisition. I believe this is an American artist, and that was a piece I bought when I lived in London, and it kind of was very much kind of the vision board for moving to the country. I used to stare at it and dream of living in amongst those surroundings, which I feel like we actually do now here. This actually was gifted to us. This is actually Putney Bridge, in London, which is sort of the bridge that joins Putney to Fulham, which then leads to Chelsea. And this part of the river is actually such a part of my childhood. This particular piece was gifted to my parents, and they gifted it to us. It's something that we really, really treasure, particularly because of its, I think the story behind it. My parents took that to Beirut with them, and it was hung there for years in their place before they came back to London. So it's done its fair share of traveling. This painting I just adore. It's a scene from the south of France. I just think it's truly exquisite the way it's been painted, and I really, really love that piece. It's nice to be surrounded by the sea and the mountains and all of the sort of art that we have around us. We've gone, for very simple kind of bedside setup here. You'll see another nod to elephants. So we've got a really cute little ceramic elephant sitting over there in the corner. He's guarding my side of the bed. This fabric I love. It's a collaboration that Kit Kemp did with GPJ Baker. I think it's wonderful. The colours really richly textured, and just I think Kit Kemp is a genius at colour mixing. She's kind of what we aspire to be, I think, as designers. This quilt is from Beate Homan, and I love everything she does. I think it's truly exquisite. The quality is just always second to none. This chair I acquired from an antiques shop in Lily Road in London, and I had it recently reupholstered in a Colfax check, which I think works really beautifully with a Samuel & Sons braided trim. And this fabric, I believe, is probably a discontinued pattern now from Sanderson, but I think it works really nicely. And actually, if you just see behind here, there's a beautiful wooden motif detail actually on the chair, which is just dreamy. And it's the level of detail, I think, on the antique pieces that just always really speaks to me. What makes a house a home? I think for us, it has to be our dogs. They are the sort of beating hearts. So they are kind of first and foremost, these little creatures make our house a home, but ultimately it's a feeling of being able to make happy memories. It's a place where, you kind of go through a lot of life stages. And so you want to make sure, I guess, that your home is always your sanctuary. And so I think, people, animals, and obviously all, being surrounded by everything you love in terms of your possessions. I guess that's what makes a house a home.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to go to homeworthy.com for exclusive content, shopping guides, and so much more.